Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in Milton, a small town in Florida, USA. She grew up in a loving family and had a close relationship with her older sister. As children, they often played outside, skateboarded, and went bowling. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, about 25 miles away from her hometown, to explore the medical field and become a medical transcriptionist. To become a medical transcriptionist, Tanya did not need a medical degree but only had to take special courses. She moved in with her cousin, Vanita, to save on rent. In Pensacola, Tanya met a boy named Tim, and they began dating. They later moved in together, and in 1983, their son Timothy was born. However, Tanya's relationship with Tim was not perfect. They argued frequently, and about a year after Timothy was born, they decided to separate. At the end of 1984, Tanya temporarily moved in with her cousin, Vanita, who was now married and had 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place and move out as soon as she could. One day, Tanya, her sister, and Vanita's husband decided to go to a local bar to celebrate New Year's Eve. Vanita and Tanya dropped their children off at daycare and decided to enjoy the night. At the bar, they had a night full of laughter and music. As the clock struck midnight, they welcomed the new year, 1985. Vanita and her husband were about to go home, but the daycare they had left their children at closed at 1 a.m., so they needed to pick them up in an hour. However, Tanya wanted to stay at the bar a little longer because, for the past 2 years, she had been focused on work and taking care of her children. Tanya asked Vanita if she could pick up her son from daycare, and Vanita agreed since they lived together and needed to pick up her son anyway. Before Vanita and her husband left the bar, Vanita asked Tanya how she would get home since they had gone to the bar together by car. Tanya told Vanita not to worry and assured her that she would find a way home since she had many acquaintances at the bar. On the morning of January 1st, Vanita woke up and was surprised to find that Tanya had not returned. Normally, Tanya would have been home by then, so this delay was unusual. At first, Vanita was not too worried, thinking that Tanya might have stayed at a friend's house. However, things quickly changed when Vanita's mother-in-law knocked on their door with a shocking announcement. Tanya had been found dead in the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident had taken her dog to the vet for an urgent medical issue. While the woman was out, her daughter saw a strange object on the road. She thought it was a mannequin, but when she told her mother, the woman decided to take a closer look. She was horrified to realize it was actually a human body. She immediately returned home and called the police. Police arrived at the crime scene and found the body of a 23-year-old woman named Tanya McKinley lying in a vacant lot near the road. When they arrived, they found her pantyhose pulled down, her skirt pulled up, and her shoes missing. Police also found a blue scarf with a red stain that looked like blood next to the victim. Her shoes were found a few blocks away, along with a wallet containing identification in her name. To clarify the cause of Tanya's death and the development of the case, the police handed over the victim's body to medical experts for an autopsy. Investigators also continued to collect and analyze traces at the scene. After the initial investigation, it was discovered that the victim was likely killed elsewhere, as there was no blood near the body except for the blue towel stain. Furthermore, traces on the ground showed that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the blue towel and the victim's body, the police found some suspicious traces. These were human hair and pubic hair, along with dog hair. They suspected that these hair and pubic hair samples might belong to the killer and that this person might have kept dogs. After the autopsy, medical experts determined that Tanya suffered a head injury from being hit with a heavy object. However, the main cause of her death was strangulation. Furthermore, experts also confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted. Experts collected a semen sample from the victim's body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, they could only determine that the suspect had type B blood. Since these clues did not help the detectives find the killer, they began to develop a list of suspects. The first suspect they focused on was Tim, the victim's ex-boyfriend. Through talking to Tanya's relatives and friends, the police discovered problems in the relationship between Tanya and Tim, as well as constant arguments both before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to break up, Tim objected and continued to try to convince her to come back. Tim kept calling Tanya, visiting her, and acting as if he could not accept the breakup. The police suspected that Tim may have followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They questioned Tim, but he denied any involvement. Tim also agreed to provide a hair sample for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the hair, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that Tim's hair was significantly different from the hair found on the victim's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily eliminated Tim as a suspect. After collecting clues at the scene, the detectives turned their attention to the people who were at the bar on New Year's Eve. They questioned Vanita about whether she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya. However, Vanita said the evening had gone smoothly and without incident. Investigators also learned that Tanya had briefly dated a man named Kurt, who worked as a bartender at the same bar. So they interviewed Kurt, who denied any involvement in the murder. Kurt claimed that after finishing his shift, he attended a New Year's Eve party with friends. However, after questioning Kurt's friends, investigators discovered something interesting. Kurt's friends confirmed that he was at the party, but not immediately after finishing his shift at the bar. Based on this testimony, police believed that Kurt had enough time to theoretically commit the murder. Through interviews with many people who were at the bar, detectives determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one witnessed her leaving the bar. Investigators also interviewed residents in the area near where the body was found. One family said they drove by around 2 a.m. and they were certain that no body was visible at that time. Investigators determined that Tanya was killed within an hour and a half of her last known sighting. During this time, Kurt had no solid alibi. He agreed to take a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive, as he gave several false answers. However, blood tests eliminated Kurt as a suspect because his blood type did not match the killer's blood type, which was determined from a semen sample. The police continued to search for other potential suspects, but their efforts were hampered. The killer's semen could not be analyzed, and the lack of significant evidence or witnesses left the case at a standstill. However, investigators were almost certain that the killer must have lived in the area near where the body was found. The area was on the edge of a large residential area and was isolated from major roads. Police suspected that a stranger would not have come there with the body without knowing anything about the area. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Sadly, Timothy lost his mother when he was 18 months old and was taken care of by his father and Tanya's family. They decided to keep the death of Timothy's mother a secret. As he grew older, relatives told him that his mother had died in a car accident. This truth was kept secret until Timothy turned 14. At Christmas, he was curious about the gift his father had prepared. While rummaging through the house, Timothy stumbled upon a letter written by his father, addressed to famous TV host Montel Williams. Tim mentioned Tanya's murder in the letter, hoping that public attention would help expedite the investigation. Through the letter, Timothy discovered the true fate of his mother because it contained specific details about the case. In 2000, the police department reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA analysis would help identify the killer. To investigate, they sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. After testing, experts concluded that the blood on the blue towel found near the body belonged to an unknown man, not Tanya. They took a sample of the man's DNA and uploaded it to the FBI database, but found no match. The case went cold again and wasn't reopened until 2015, exactly 30 years after the murder. Detectives had to try a different approach when the killer's DNA had not yet appeared in the FBI database. With modern technology, they could search not only for exact matches but also for partial matches. They believed the database might contain information about the killer's relatives, which could lead them closer to solving the case. After searching, they focused on one specific person in the FBI database. His DNA had some similarities to the DNA sample of Tanya's killer, although the similarity was not strong. The police investigated his family extensively and even contacted his relatives. They agreed to assist and provide their DNA samples for comparison. After analyzing the samples, experts discovered that the family had no connection to the suspect, leaving detectives without any significant new clues. In 2018, journalist Tony Adam took an interest in the case. Although he was not a criminal expert, his personal interest in the subject drew him to Tanya's unsolved murder. He wanted to help and contacted the investigators working on the case. The detectives initially viewed his willingness to help with some skepticism. Although an experienced journalist, Tony had no background in criminal investigations. However, as the case dragged on without any progress, the police accepted his help. During the investigation, Tony established a relationship with Tanya's family. They could see his genuine interest in solving the case and the considerable effort he was putting in. He worked to get media coverage of the case, bringing additional attention to it. This also contributed a new perspective to an investigation that had lasted for more than 3 decades. Detectives decided to renew their efforts to find the suspect's relatives. This time, they partnered with Parabon, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. In the previous effort, investigators had only searched for killers' relatives through the FBI's database. However, Parabon expanded the search to include public genetic databases where anyone can upload their DNA samples. Experts worked diligently to find the killer's relatives, carefully examining family trees to identify someone matching the suspect's characteristics. They were looking for a man who was of age at the time of the crime in 1985 and lived in the area. The process took nearly a year. But in February 2020, experts finally identified a man who could be a suspect, Daniel Wells, 57, who lived in the same city where the murder occurred. As detectives learned more about Daniel, they discovered he had previous run-ins with the law, having been arrested for assault and for indecent exposure in the late 1980s. As of 2020, Daniel continued to live and work in Pensacola with his family. However, to establish a connection between him and the case, investigators needed to collect a DNA sample from Daniel due to a lack of concrete evidence. The police had been monitoring Daniel closely, concerned that he might flee once he learned he was a suspect. The opportunity presented itself when Daniel discarded a cigarette butt near his workplace. Investigators collected it and quickly sent it to the lab. There, experts isolated DNA from the saliva on the butt and compared it to the DNA sample from the crime scene. The results showed that the 2 samples were a perfect match. 35 years after the murder, the police finally identified the culprit through DNA evidence. Daniel was arrested that same day. Despite the DNA test results, the investigators wanted to hear Daniel's confession. They planned to conduct the interrogation carefully, not revealing all the evidence at once. The investigators deliberately withheld information to encourage honesty during Daniel's interrogation. They gradually shifted the conversation to Tanya's murder and asked about Daniel's whereabouts on the night of the crime. At first, he denied ever knowing Tanya. The detectives then revealed that they had found his DNA at the crime scene. Although Daniel continued to deny everything, he appeared to become more nervous with each question. The detectives emphasized the importance of the DNA test results, making it impossible for him to avoid the questions. They told him that the only way to alleviate the situation was to confess. And it worked. Daniel began to tell his story. Initially, he tried to justify the presence of his DNA by suggesting that he might have had sex with Tanya that night. But the detectives didn't believe him and continued pressing for the truth. Daniel eventually confessed to killing Tanya on that New Year's Eve. Daniel's story raised serious questions. He admitted that he met Tanya at a bar and offered to take her home. They then went to Daniel's house, drank, and had consensual sex. However, an argument broke out, and Daniel couldn't remember what it was about. In a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, he panicked and took her body to another location to dispose of it. On the way back, he discarded her belongings and returned home. However, Daniel's story had many inconsistencies. When asked about the dog hairs on Tanya's clothes and towels, he explained that his roommate had a black Labrador. But this did not explain why Tanya would willingly have sex with him only to have a violent argument that led to her death. Furthermore, Daniel claimed that Tanya died from a blow to the head, but medical experts determined that the actual cause of death was strangulation. This made Daniel's story unreliable and suggested he was trying to minimize his responsibility. A more plausible scenario is that Daniel attacked Tanya, but she fought back. When this failed, Daniel struck Tanya's head, but then realized she was still alive, so he strangled her. Although Daniel's confession did not completely match the facts, detectives had enough evidence to arrest him. Daniel was arrested for murder and taken into custody. Investigators then contacted Tanya's family, including her son, to let them know that the killer had been caught. Timothy was emotional and thanked the police for finding his mother's killer. However, Daniel did not face trial or serve any prison time for his actions. Just 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An autopsy revealed that he had committed suicide. Although Tanya's family was disappointed that the killer had committed suicide in prison, they finally received justice after 35 years. The case of Ana Ramirez. Amanda and Ana Ramirez, born on January 8, 1992, in Camden, New Jersey, USA, are identical twins, arriving just minutes apart. From a young age, they were incredibly close, often wearing similar clothes and choosing the same toys. Their relationship was characterized by understanding and genuine emotional, with conflicts between them being rare. Although they were born in the USA, they come from a family that emigrated from Puerto Rico, a large family with the dream of achieving the American dream. Despite facing challenges, their family's unity and love helped them overcome difficulties. Amanda and Anna were seeking a better life in the USA. When they grew up, their family gave birth to another daughter. Of course, Amanda and Anna stood them out because of their identical appearance. From a young age, their parents emphasized the special bond they had since their time in the womb. They slept in the same crib during their first months, which contributed to their close relationship. As they grew older, Amanda and Anna did everything together and acted as a team. They were very close and always stayed by each other's side. Their mother encouraged this bond, hoping Amanda and Anna would always support each other. And indeed, they did. Amanda and Anna took their first steps together, holding hands to keep from falling. The two girls, who grew stronger together, they were inseparable during kindergarten, elementary, and high school. Their bond stayed strong into adulthood, and it seemed like nothing could break this pure sisterly union, which grew stronger each year. Gradually, carefree childhood ended and adulthood began. Anna had better relationships with man. She was the first of the twins to get married and become a mother. She was described as a loving and dedicated mother who did everything for her kids. At that time, Anna had completed courses and received certification in a field of activity related to helping people. This accentuates her friendly and positive personality. Colleagues and friends admired Anna's kindness, describes her as a friendly and humble beauty. When Anna became a mother, she had to balance her career with her family responsibilities, striving to create a bright future for her daughter. Later, she had 2 more children. Anna still maintains regular contact with her family, especially her beloved twin sister, Amanda. She often comes home to visit her grandparents, mother, brothers, and sisters. Anna and Amanda still keep in regular contact, they exchanging messages and phone calls to share their daily experiences. When Anna had a daughter, Amanda was eager to know all about her niece and frequently inquired about her. Amanda helped Anna a lot, supporting her in taking care of her children and learning the fundamentals of motherhood. Amanda also aspired to have her own family and become a mother, so she paid close attention to every piece of advice Anna offered. Amanda was kind and caring, always ready to assist. Amanda regularly spent time with Anna and her children. During the first few years of her life, Anna's eldest daughter spent a lot of time with both her mother and with her aunt, Amanda. This allowed the aunt, Amanda, to bond with her niece and gain valuable childcare experience. These skills and knowledge later proved useful to her. At that time, Anna was very busy, and it was with Amanda's help that she was able to manage daily tasks. Whenever they had free time, the sisters often spent time together, went for walks, and relaxed on weekends. Anna and Amanda loved parties and could go dancing all night long. In those moments, they were with their close friends. They were always friendly and cheerful. However, the story of the 2 sisters had a sad ending. Life showed that even the closest and most sincere connections can be broken in a cruel and heartless way, and the circumstances are so strange that it's almost impossible to tell the truth from the lies. In 2019, Anna and her twin sister Amanda were both 27 years old. Anna had 3 children, while Amanda had just given birth to her first child. During this time, Amanda was experiencing a difficult period in her life. She had struggled with emotional problems after giving birth. She was diagnosed with postpartum depression, and her family around to support her. To help her sister Amanda through this difficult time, Anna often tried to bring some joy into her life. Amanda frequently met with Anna to have a drink and discuss the difficulty of motherhood, which both sisters understood well. On the evening of June 22nd, the sisters planned to attend a party with close friends. After the party, they intended to visit their cousin before heading home. That evening, Anna and Amanda gathered at home to choose their outfits and do their makeup. At the party, they had a great time, laughing and enjoying themselves. The next morning, Anna and Amanda posted a photo together on Anna's social media page and captioned it that they were having fun. Nobody anticipated that this cheerful post would be the last one where both twins would be alive. Just a few hours later, the police received a call from a distressed girl who said she had found her sister on the street. The caller is Amanda, and she urgently requested the officers to hurry. Amanda reported that Anna had been shot in the chest but didn't know who the shooter was. She noticed a deep cut on the right side of the chest. Anna was lying on the street right in front of their cousin's house, where they had spent most of the evening drinking and taking selfies. Amanda mentioned that they had visited a brother whom they had not seen for a long time, and it seems a conflict erupted there. Around 5:30, Anna was injured and collapsed on the sidewalk. After receiving the call, the medics quickly arrived at the scene. They found Anna lying on the asphalt in a pool of her own blood, while Amanda was not nearby. Anna had lost a large amount of blood, putting her life at risk, so urgent action was required. The police also responded and reached the scene after the ambulance. Anna was on the ground, seriously injured, bleeding, but still alive, with a deep wound in her chest. The medics promptly placed her in the ambulance and administered first aid during the ride. The police hoped Anna could identify her attacker, but she lost consciousness in the ambulance due to severe blood loss and was immediately taken to a medical center. On the way to the hospital, doctors tried to keep Anna alive. However, less than an hour later, at 6:20, the medical center staff pronounced her dead, unable to save her. This news was a devastating shock for her family. Suddenly, overnight, Anna, a mother of 3 children, was gone because of a violent act. The motive behind this senseless act was completely unclear. Anna was kind-hearted, empathetic, and had no legal issues or criminal history. Was she the victim of a random or intentional crime, and should the investigation focus on those around her to find the killer? The investigators quickly noticed that Anna's belongings, such as her money and mobile phone, were left untouched, suggesting she was not robbed. The violent nature of the incident indicated it was personal. Police began questioning neighbors, but they confirmed that Amanda's account of Anna arguing with her cousin was untrue. Several witnesses reported hearing only Anna and Amanda arguing loudly, with no men's voices present. This went on for a considerable time, until the argument stopped and the medics arrived. The police detectives came to Amanda's apartment to gather information. She had called the emergency number and was able to provide valuable information and an explanation of the argument. Amanda confirmed that she had argued with Anna that night, but she went home after the argument ended. Then something unexpected happened. Someone attacked Anna, but Amanda didn't see the attack. When she returned, she found Anna bleeding. When it was reported that Anna had died, Amanda showed no emotion. This might have been due to nervousness or exhaustion, but it caught the police's attention. Even though Amanda received the news of Anna's death with an odd calm, it was something else that caught the police's attention. What really intrigued the detectives were the bloodstains on Amanda's clothes. Additionally, her face had visible scratches and there was dried blood on her head. Her hands were covered in injuries typical of defensive actions, like cuts, suggesting she might have tried to take a knife from someone. The police also found several bloody footprints that went Anna's body on the street to the building's door, up the stairs, and reached the apartment where Amanda and Anna spent the night. At first, when investigators requested to enter the apartment, Amanda was hesitant to let them in because she was frightened and tried to persuade the officers that her injuries were accidental. However, the situation was too suspicious to accept her explanation. Ultimately, Amanda allowed the police to enter without requiring a warrant. At the apartment, they also discovered traces of blood. In the kitchen, they found a large carving knife in the sink, covered in dried blood. Detectives saw this as clear evidence implicating Amanda in Anna's death. She was promptly arrested and brought to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, Amanda provided investigators with 3 different accounts of how Anna might have died. In the first account, Amanda claimed she had no idea what happened to Anna, stating that she found Anna already injured on the street. Amanda didn't notice any suspicious people or vehicles, leaving her completely baffled by the incident. Amanda thought that Anna would not have an enemy capable of such harm, so she speculated that her cousin might be involved. She recalled that Anna was conscious at the time but had lost a big amount of blood and was disoriented. Amanda got blood on herself while trying to help Anna and went into shock before entering the apartment, which seemed unconvincing. Additionally, Amanda didn't mention defensive wounds from a sharp object, and the bloody knife found in the kitchen was puzzling. Upon realizing that the police thought her story was a lie, Amanda attempted to revise her story. It's important to note that Amanda was very intoxicated, making it challenging for detectives to follow her narrative. Her testimony was confused and contradictory. Despite this, she offered a revised version of the incident that evening. They were at their cousin's house drinking. As morning approached, Anna drank too much and felt unwell, so she decided to order a taxi. When the car arrived, she said goodbye and left, but no one confirmed that she got into the car. After which Amanda decided to head home. On her way, she discovered Anna injured on the street. Anna had a severe chest wound and was bleeding heavily, but she couldn't explain what had happened. Amanda quickly called an ambulance and notified the police. The detectives attempted to reach the cousin who owned the apartment to verify Amanda's story. However, at the time, this was never done. Realizing her difficult position, Amanda desperately offered a third version of events. She confessed that while they were drinking, a fight broke out between she and Anna. Under the influence of alcohol, Anna lost control and punched she in the face. Although Amanda was momentarily disoriented, but she quickly regained her senses. She recalled feeling furious after Anna hit her, but then she experienced a memory lapse. Amanda intended to enter the apartment to cool down, but moments later, she found herself standing on the street in front of Anna, person who is bleeding. According to Amanda, she doesn't remember what happened during this time. The latest and most credible version of events is that during this time, she went into the apartment and took a kitchen knife. The conflict had subsided by then, although no one witnessed the incident, but all evidence suggests that Anna was killed. When Amanda saw Anna in that state, she went back to the apartment to grab a cell phone and call emergency services. During this time, she tossed a knife into the kitchen sink. She contacted the medics but stayed in the apartment, overwhelmed by shock. Sadly, Anna's injury was too severe, and she passed away. This tragedy deeply affected the Shi family. The news about the incident became a main topic in the media, especially within their local community. Many interviews were conducted, and most people found it hard to believe that such a tragedy could occur between them. Anna and Amanda's sisters were known to be so close, to the point that few can remember any petty quarrel between them. During this time, Amanda was arrested and sent to the County Correctional Center to await her murder trial. Her lawyer claimed the crime was accidental and argued that Amanda should be released on bail and placed under house arrest to care for her newborn daughter. However, the judge denied this request because of the crime's severity. Amanda was denied bail as she was deemed too dangerous for society. Concerns were raised about her emotional state, so psychiatrists frequently evaluated her. They found no mental disorders, deeming her sane and fit to stand trial. During this time, investigators thoroughly verified all the information provided. It was confirmed that Anna and Amanda did indeed spend time with cousin, who was eventually located and able to testify as a key witness. Although some neighbors heard arguments and the sounds of a struggle, no one witnessed the actual attack. Amanda continued to claim that she could not remember what happened. Cousin confirmed that a quarrel occurred between Anna and Amanda that night, but it ended, and he did not see any attack between them. The cousin stated that then Anna and Amanda had calmed down, and everything seemed normal. He never expected that Anna and Amanda, who had been so close since childhood, to be involved in something as unthinkable as a stabbing. The cousin confirmed that before things settled down, Anna and Amanda did get into a fight. This might explain the scratches on Amanda's hands and face, as well as more serious defensive wounds, deep cuts on her hands, suggesting they fought by a knife. However, the cousin did not know the reason for the sisters' fight. In September 2019, Amanda gave the investigators her final account of events to the best of her memory. She recalled having a fight with Anna while they were at their cousin's apartment, but claimed she was too drunk to remember the cause of the conflict. Amanda explained that at one point, she lost of awareness, and when she regained awareness, she found herself standing over Anna, holding a bloody knife. She noticed the bleeding was severe and worried that she might have been responsible. Feeling overwhelmed, Amanda said she left Anna in the street and fled. She confessed that she would never have acted this way if not for being intoxicated. Amanda, a young mother, recognized there was no excuse for her actions and expressed deep regret, but she stressed that the murder was accidental. The prosecution was certain that Amanda was not being entirely honest and that the attack was intentional. They believed that an argument led to Anna's death. Detectives suspected that Amanda had a motive, thinking she had held a long-standing grudge against Anna. In the end, her intoxication turned this anger into aggression. The investigators were trying to confirm if the act was premeditated. The police suspect that a man, who both sisters were attracted to, was involved in the incident, as he seemed to be the most likely cause of the conflict between them. Amanda explained this because she didn't want her loved ones to know that the death of Anna was due to such a trivial reason. This thing were confirmed by an anonymous source. One day, a man who wished to remain unnamed called the police station. He claimed that jealousy was the motive behind the cruel act against Anna. Anna's aunt also confirmed this thing. She shared the story with both the media and the police. According to her, the conflict arose because of Anna's husband. It was revealed that Amanda had secretly been in love with him for a long time. She envied Anna and even used her resemblance to Anna to have sexual relations with him. When Anna discovered this, she was furious and accused Amanda of betrayal. The aunt mentioned that Amanda had often bragged that neither Anna nor her husband had any idea about the deception. This seemed especially horrific in light of the murder, giving the police strong reasons to suspect a premeditated act driven by jealousy. Even so, Amanda's family provided her with strong support. Her mother attended every hearing and was moved every time. Her mother realized that one daughter was already lost forever, and Amanda faced the possibility of spending her life in prison, which filled her with sorrow. Other relatives were also consistently present at the hearings, repeatedly pleading with the judge for leniency. They highlighted that Amanda had recently given birth, and her child risked growing up without a caring mother. In addition, the family also opposes the theory that the motive for the attack was a love triangle. Except for an aunt who gave conflicting testimony about affairs, no one had heard such rumors about Amanda's personal life. Everyone saw how warm and close the relationship between Anna and Amanda was. Even during the last party, they seemed very friendly. It was unlikely that they would have maintained such a close connection after the betrayal. Amanda's younger sister, named Monica, who was 19 at the time of the trial, claimed that Anna and Amanda had a very strong bond. She was sure there couldn't be any love triangles in their lives. Both sisters were decent and wouldn't get involved in something like that. Monica said that Anna had been in a long-term relationship with a man named Luis Rivera, who was also her husband. During that time, Amanda also had a boyfriend, with whom she had a child, and they were planning to get married. Therefore, there was no reason for Amanda to date Anna's boyfriend secretly. Monica added that Amanda called her as soon as the tragic incident happened. Amanda cried a lot during the phone call, insisting she did not remember anything. Monica believed that, in her current state, Amanda would be honest and confess if she were guilty. Consequently, she dismissed the prosecutor's suggestion that Amanda was involved with Anna's husband. Anna's husband also denied having any affair with Amanda's, stating that he could easily differentiate them and such deception was impossible. The prosecution continued to question Amanda, they trying to understand the motive behind the massacre, but they couldn't get any more information. Despite the murder, the entire Ramirez family and those connected to Amanda dismissed the idea of a love triangle as fiction. They were convinced that the case materials were fabricated by the police to treat the crime as a premeditated attack, which would mean imprisoning Amanda for a longer time. Anna's husband, Luis, firmly denied the aunt's statements. However, the prosecution continued with this theory, suggesting that Louise was unaware of being manipulated. The accusation of infidelity was central to the prosecution's strategy, which deeply enraged the entire Ramirez family. Amanda's lawyer mentioned that the incident might not be solely related to alcohol intoxication that night. Anna and Amanda drank a lot, but the aggression was due to postpartum depression. Amanda faced emotional issues after her pregnancy and struggled to manage them. Her lawyer explained that her mental state, along with excessive alcohol consumption, triggered an episode of uncontrollable aggression. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence to support this claim. A psychiatric evaluation revealed that Amanda was fully aware of her actions. The tears of the mother and the pleas of the sisters had a positive impact. In November 2019, Amanda reached a deal with the prosecution. This deal resolved the controversy surrounding her motive and spared her family the ordeal of a lengthy trial. In the end, Amanda received a sentence of only 6 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 5 years. During the sentencing hearing, Amanda was overcome with emotion, breaking down in tears and trembling. She acknowledged that her actions were inexcusable, expressing remorse to those present. For Amanda, the most severe punishment was the pain of loss she would feel for the rest of her life. Amanda asked for forgiveness. Although inconsolable, but the family said they held no grudges and considered the punishment fair. Furthermore, Amanda's mother and younger sister announced they would continue to support she and her children until her release. Anna's mother took responsibility and custody of Anna's children. All the children went to live with their grandmother. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was revered as a model family, exceeding expectations with their stable economic background and exemplary children. They effortlessly commanded admiration from those around them. William Petit, the patriarch, was a Connecticut native and a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he naturally assumed a leadership role. In addition to his athletic prowess, he was also the valedictorian of his class, as evidenced by his law degree from Dartmouth University. However, his true passion lay not in law, but in helping people, caring for the sick, and making the world a better place. So, after graduating, he pursued a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. During his 3rd year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, William met Jennifer Hawke, an oncology nurse and co-director of the health center's pre-graduate internship program. They soon fell deeply in love, and those who knew them attested that they were perfect for each other. They married in 1985, and 4 years later, they welcomed their first daughter, Haley. The pregnancy spurred them to form a large family, leading them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. After giving birth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and co-director of the internship. Sadly, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that has no cure, which she fought against for the rest of her life. Despite this, her family remained supportive throughout. At just 10 years old, their eldest daughter began raising funds for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, an endeavor that would yield significant sums over the years. Meanwhile, Michaela excelled academically and planned to take over the fundraising efforts when her sister went to college, enabling her to continue making a positive impact in her community. Having spent the summer learning to cook, she often delighted in preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this ordinary activity led to a fateful encounter with the perpetrator. On a July night in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner for her family, but required additional ingredients for her recipe. So she and her mother went to the nearest market. Joshua Komisarjevsky, who had recently been released from prison, happened to be at the same location. Komisarjevsky's childhood was marked by trauma and complexity. Born to teenage parents, he was adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, a renowned European artistic dynasty, just a week after birth. His adoptive family was deeply religious and enforced strict discipline, which contributed to his struggles in school despite his high IQ. Eventually, his parents opted to homeschool him. During his trial, Komisarjevsky alleged that he was sexually abused by a cousin during childhood, but his family chose to keep the incident quiet. This traumatic experience likely contributed to the development of his rebellious and chaotic personality. By 14, Joshua Komisarjevsky had faced accusations of abusing his sister, and around this time he committed his first burglary, launching his career as a thief. In 2002, he was arrested for the first time on 18 counts of burglary and theft, earning him a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he made a chilling admission, revealing that he derived pleasure from listening to people while they slept and invading their privacy, feeding off their insecurity. Released on parole in 2007 at 27, officials deemed him a threat to society, a calculating criminal with perverted tendencies. But the jury disregarded these warnings, deeming Joshua fit for release. After his release, he moved into a halfway house for ex-convicts, where he encountered his future accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had a lengthy history of incarceration, starting at the age of 16 in 1980. Throughout the years, he was repeatedly arrested for violent robbery and burglary, earning him multiple sentences. In 2004, he received a prison sentence, only to be granted parole in 2006, which ultimately led him to the same residence where he crossed paths with Komisarjevsky. On the night of July 22, 2007, Michaela Petit was busily preparing dinner for her family, only to realize she needed additional ingredients to complete her recipe. She asked her mother to drive her to the nearest market to pick up the necessary items. What they didn't know was that they were being closely watched by Komisarjevsky, who took meticulous note of every detail, from the make and model of their vehicle to their facial features and Michaela's distinctive blonde hair. After finishing their shopping, the Petit family returned home, oblivious to the fact that they were being tailed. The family had a peaceful dinner, unaware it would be their last together. Later, while the others slept, William Petit dozed off in the living room. Suddenly, strange noises shattered the peace. William was attacked, beaten with a baseball bat, and left tied up in the basement. The intruders proceeded upstairs to locate Haley's room, where they found her asleep. Haley and her sister Michaela were bound to their bedposts by their hands and feet, their heads shrouded by pillowcases. In the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit slumbered peacefully. The intruders crept in and roused her effortlessly, swiftly restraining her hands and feet. With the family members under their control, the intruders took their time to survey the premises, even pausing to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After ransacking the home for jewelry, cash, and other valuables, they finally prepared to depart. As the Petits heard the burglars making their exit, they must have thought the ordeal was finally over. But, unbeknownst to them, their torment was only just beginning. After selling stolen items at a pawn shop, the ex-convicts were disappointed to find they hadn't gotten as much money as they had expected. Motivated by greed, they decided to return to the house. There, they found a check register with $40,000 and planned to steal $155,000. Before going back, they filled a couple of gasoline cans, which was captured on surveillance camera footage. Back at the house, they presented their plan to Jennifer, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't cooperate. Desperate to protect her daughter, Jennifer agreed to accompany Stephen to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence by entering Michaela's room, where he untied her and began to undress her. He took photos with his cell phone and sexually assaulted her, recording the act. Afterwards, he took her to the bathroom to clean her and ensure no DNA evidence was left behind. Then, he ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The autopsy of Michaela later revealed evidence that Komisarjevsky had raped her. During the examination, State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver found Arvy's DNA in her body. At the bank, everything appeared normal, but Stephen was unaware of Jennifer's actions in the queue before she approached the teller. While waiting in line, Jennifer wrote a discreet note on a flyer asking for assistance. The note read, "My name is Jennifer Hawk Petit. I have $115,000 in my savings account, and I need to withdraw it. I'm in a desperate situation. My family is being held hostage and will be killed if I don't comply. Please, someone, call the police." Despite Jennifer not having any identification, the teller decided to give her the money. As soon as Jennifer received the cash, she left the bank and returned to the car where her captor was waiting. Meanwhile, the bank employee promptly called the police to report the incident. The manager informed the 911 dispatcher that Hawk Petit claimed the home invaders were being courteous, and that she believed their sole intention was to steal money. In response to the bank's alert, the Chester police carefully assessed the situation, establishing a discreet vehicle perimeter without alerting the intruders. With the situation now under surveillance, the police observed from a safe distance, opting not to intervene just yet. Joshua boasted to his accomplice about attacking Michaela, implying he'd do the same to Jennifer. Stephen restrained and undressed Jennifer while William, hearing her cries, yelled up and was told to calm down. Regaining consciousness, William freed himself, crawled to the stairs and escaped to the backyard, fearing they'd kill them all. Joshua went to check on William, only to discover that he had escaped. In her later confession, Hayes revealed that while she and Stephen were raping Hawk Petit on the living room floor, Komisarski burst in and announced that William had fled. Upon hearing this, Stephen strangled Jennifer to death, continuing to assault her even in her final moments. Shortly after, they heard William's cries for help. A neighbor, initially unaware of the traumatized boy's identity due to his severe injuries, called 911, realizing the police would soon arrive. To eliminate all evidence, the intruders doused Jennifer's lifeless body and parts of the house, including the daughter's bedrooms and their own clothing, with gasoline. Investigators later found traces of the accelerant on the Petit sisters' beds and the clothes they wore. Hayes and Komisarski set the house ablaze and fled, unaware that the authorities had set up a perimeter a few miles ahead. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle, and after being surrounded, the two perpetrators were pulled from their car and arrested. They were immediately identified as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, the fire raging through the house was growing in intensity. An ambulance arrived, and Dr. William Petit, the gravely injured father, was rushed to the nearest hospital. Soon after, firefighters battled the blaze, and upon extinguishing it, they stumbled upon a horrific scene amidst the remnants of the house. The first body discovered was Jennifer's, her remains charred with remnants of rope bound to her ankles. Upon reaching the second floor, they found Michaela, still tied to her bed, having succumbed to the devastating flames. In a surprising twist, Haley had managed to break free from her restraints and attempted to escape, but sadly collapsed just a few meters away, overcome by the toxic smoke. William managed to free himself from his restraints, escape the house, and crawl to a neighbor's yard to seek help. The neighbor failed to recognize him at first due to the severity of his injuries. Both Hayes and Komorowski confessed to the murders. During her interrogation, detectives noted that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout. Each assailant accused the other of being the driving force and mastermind behind the home invasion. Komorowski's diary, later entered into evidence, revealed that he blamed William for the murders, calling him a coward and claiming that he could have saved his family if he had wanted to. The trial of Stephen Hayes began on September 13, 2010, with a jury comprising 7 women and 5 men. The defense argued that Joshua Komorowski was the mastermind behind the crime, responsible for escalating its violent nature, while prosecutors argued that both Hayes and Komorowski shared responsibility. After approximately 5 hours of deliberation on October 5th, the jury found Hayes guilty. The sentencing phase began on October 18th, with the jury initially divided over recommending life imprisonment or death. Hayes' defense argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. On November 8th, the jury recommended the death sentence for Hayes on each of the 6 capital felony counts. Earlier, Hayes had attempted to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. Dr. William Petit, the sole survivor, remarked on the verdict, while the Connecticut State Judicial Branch took the unprecedented step of offering post-traumatic stress assistance to jurors, acknowledging the trial's profoundly disturbing nature. This historic measure was necessitated by the jurors' 2-month exposure to graphic images and gruesome testimony during the triple murder trial, marking the first time the state judicial branch had provided such support. On December 2, 2010, Hayes expressed remorse for the suffering he had inflicted on the Petit family, stating that his own death would be a welcome relief and hoping it would bring peace and comfort to those he had hurt. Judge John Blue handed down 6 death sentences and an additional 106 years for other crimes. However, in August 2015, Hayes' death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment when Connecticut abolished capital punishment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty, arguing that Komisarjevsky was under Hayes' influence. Komisarjevsky was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During sentencing, Komisarjevsky expressed shame and remorse for the harm caused, claiming he had not intended to kill anyone. Judge Blue set July 20, 2012 as Komisarjevsky's execution date, underscoring his responsibility for the crime. However, like Hayes, Komisarjevsky's death sentence was converted to life imprisonment in August 2015, following Connecticut's abolition of the death penalty. The trials and sentencing of Hayes and Komisarjevsky represent a dark and pivotal chapter in Connecticut's legal history. The heinous nature of the crimes and the emotional toll on all involved, including the jurors, exposed the complexities and challenges of the legal system in dealing with such atrocious acts. Dr. Petit's statements during the trials poignantly highlighted the lasting impact of the crime on surviving family members and the community, which continues to pay tribute to the memory of the victims. The sole survivor, Dr. William Petit, was released from the hospital just 4 days after admission to attend his family's funeral. Tormented by guilt and the anguish of having survived, he later founded a foundation to aid children and young victims of violence, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. He later pursued a career in politics, becoming a state representative as a member of the Republican Party. The brutal murders of the Petit family have had a profound and lasting impact on the community, which comes together every year to honor their memory. Lingering questions persist among family members and the public regarding whether the authorities responded adequately to the crisis, particularly with respect to the time spent observing the situation from a safe distance, which may have been critical in preventing the devastating outcome. The case of Samadi Fonseca Fernandez. Samadi was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Information about her family and childhood is limited. She grew up in the Cuban with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. From a young age, Samadi attended a local school and showed a complex personality. Samadi stood out for her beauty and knew how to take advantage of her appearance. However, due to her ambition and vanity, she put material and personal interests first, disappointing many people. She was also very jealous and aggressive when she was young. Thanks to her doll-like appearance, Samadi Fonseca worked for many years as a Barbie in a large bookstore of the Universal Company. The nickname Barbie stuck with her ever since. After graduating from high school, Samadi began a relationship with Osvaldo Fernando Belier, a successful journalist working for a local television station. Osvaldo was 16 years older than Samadi. This was Samadi's longest and most serious relationship, but Osvaldo never proposed to her. In 1996, they had a son, Christopher, and a year later, a daughter, Christina, was born. Due to scandals and jealousy, Samadhi and Osvaldo divorced in 2012. In 2013, Osvaldo died at the age of 53 without leaving a will for Samadhi. Not accepting this, Samadhi decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to Osvaldo's old house, occupied it, and changed the locks to prevent his family and heirs from entering. In addition to seizing the property, Samadhi also took some of Osvaldo's valuables. Osvaldo's family was extremely angry and immediately sued Samadhi for theft. The police forced Samadhi to leave the house, but no criminal proceedings were initiated against her. Samadhi had several relationships, most notably with Miguel Angel Perez, with whom she had a third daughter, Maria. Some sources claim that they were married but divorced after a few years. However, other sources claim that Samadhi was not married, but simply gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his consent. Many strange events have been discovered. Some Barbie lovers have gone missing or died under mysterious circumstances. However, this has not been noticed for a long time. For example, one of Samadhi's lovers went missing after breaking up with her. To this day, this person has not been found. Many suspect Samadhi's involvement, but there is no concrete evidence. Another case is Diaco, also Samadhi's former lover. He was murdered after breaking up with her. The case looked like a failed robbery. The perpetrator was never caught. Again, people suspected Samadhi was involved, but there was no clear evidence. The most famous victim believed to be linked to Samadhi was Gerardo Cruz. Gerardo Cruz, a Costa Rican native, was born in December 1992 in San Jose. He did not know his biological father because he left the family before he was born. Gerardo's mother, Ana Patricia, later married a man named Hermes Rodriguez. Hermes adopted Gerardo and loved him as his own son. A few years later, Gerardo had a younger sister named Milena. His childhood and youth were quite peaceful. He attended a normal school, loved motorbikes, and soon found true love with a girl named Carol. At the age of 23, Gerardo, his wife and 4-year-old daughter Genesis Cruz moved to live with his aunt and uncle in the suburbs of San Sebastian. He worked at a local bakery to support his family. Gerardo and Carol was happy and were expecting a second child. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadhi, a regular customer at the bakery. Samadhi was 40 years old but still attractive, liked to dress provocatively and flirt with men. Notably, she started having affairs with much younger men, probably because she enjoyed the attention they received. Despite the age difference of nearly 20 years, Gerardo quickly became infatuated with this beautiful woman and began dating her secretly. She often came to the bakery, almost every day, to meet her young lover, attracting the attention of other employees. Samadhi was often accompanied by his eldest daughter Christina, who was 19 at the time. Initially, Gerardo skillfully balanced his family life with his secret meetings with his mistress. Both women were unaware of each other's existence. However, Gerardo gradually became careless and began telling his friends and colleagues about Samadhi, praising her as a great mistress and giving him gifts. Rumors of Gerardo's relationship soon reached his mother, who tried to convince her son to leave his mistress. However, Gerardo and Samadhi's relationship only lasted a few months and ended in October 2015, when Samadhi discovered that Gerardo had a pregnant wife and a young daughter. Samadhi was furious and began calling and texting Gerardo's wife, Carol, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo if he did not stay with her. Gerardo begged his wife for forgiveness and wanted to keep the family together. He did not take Samadhi's threats seriously, thinking that she would quickly cool down and find a new boyfriend. He did not expect how vengeful Samadhi would become. Just a few days after the breakup with Samadhi, while walking on a downtown street, Gerardo discovered an older man secretly filming up a young woman's skirt. Gerardo was angry and decided to record the incident with his phone. He then approached the woman, explained the situation and advised her to call the police. Next, he chased the man for about 2 minutes, trying to capture his face. Finally, the man fled in a taxi. That evening, Gerardo posted a video of the incident on his personal website. After just one night, the video went viral online. Netizens quickly identified the elderly man in the video as Luis Solmano Delgado, a former finance ministry official. The video quickly spread across media, turning Gerardo into a national celebrity. He was repeatedly invited to interviews in newspapers, on television, and on radio to recount the incident, condemn the former official's actions, and affirm that he had no regrets about what he had done. Meanwhile, a team of talented lawyers hired by Luis began to legally attack Gerardo. They accused him of violating the law by distributing the video and were preparing to sue him. Gerardo was surprised and confused by the situation, not knowing why he was being tried instead of the man who had committed a depraved act with an innocent girl. On October 7th, Gerardo gave his final interview on a local radio station. He was confident in his views and did not feel nervous. The next day, Gerardo planned to meet his friend Oswald after work, but canceled, citing an emergency. It was later revealed that Gerardo had received a text message from Somadi that day. In the message, she had lured him to the park that evening with the promise of another interview. Gerardo trusted his ex-girlfriend completely and did not suspect anything. After work, he went to the meeting place, but instead of meeting the journalist, he was attacked by 2 strange men. They robbed him of his bag, beat him and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before running away. Before losing consciousness, Gerardo called his friend to tell him the news. The friend immediately called the police and an ambulance. Thanks to timely treatment, Gerardo was taken to the hospital. Doctors tried to save his life for 42 days. During this time, Gerardo underwent many surgeries, but ultimately did not survive. On November 19th, Gerardo passed away in the intensive care unit. Since Gerardo had just become famous before the tragedy, the news of his condition attracted national attention and was not exaggerated. Gerardo's family gave interviews, asking people to pray for his recovery. They did not understand why someone would attack Gerardo. Many people attended the funeral to express their condolences to the family. People hoped that the police would soon catch the culprit and give him a fair trial. There were initially many theories about the case. One theory was that it was a robbery-murder, because Gerardo was attacked in the park in the evening, his bag was stolen and he was stabbed with a knife. However, a few days before, Gerardo released a shocking video involving a famous former official, which could be related to the case. Therefore, the second theory was that it was a revenge murder. The media reported that Luis Solmano Delgado may have hired a hitman to kill the young man who had damaged his reputation. The case caused a heated debate in the press and people protested to demand the arrest of the culprit. The police began to investigate various theories and look for Gerardo's enemies. The investigation went dormant for months until May 2016, when a security camera video was discovered. The video showed 2 men running away from the crime scene. They immediately became prime suspects, but the police needed to identify and arrest them. The video became crucial evidence and, when released, helped move the investigation forward. The video was repeatedly shown on the news, urging viewers to look out for dangerous suspects. Police sketched the suspects and their physical features. Not long after, one suspect turned himself in and cooperated with the investigation, hoping for a reduced sentence. Thanks to his information, the investigation quickly identified other accomplices and the masterminds. All those involved were arrested, including Somadi and his daughter Cristina, the masterminds, Ronald Arce Barrientos, the taxi driver, Cesar Chavez Cerdas, who acted as an intermediary, Omar Costa, the young miner who directly participated in the attack and followed the victim. The roles and connections of the participants in the case were determined through phone calls and text messages. Samadi was the mastermind who planned the entire incident in detail and recruited his daughter Christina to participate. They asked their friends Ronald and Cesar to find an assassin to kill Gerardo, disguising it as a robbery in the park at night. Omar also participated with the task of ensuring that the victim arrived at the right location. Samadi chose October 7th as the date of the murder. On that day, she contacted all the participants several times, assigning roles and ensuring that everyone followed the plan. The young woman also asked them to bring her some of her ex-lover's belongings as evidence after the crime. Gerardo, after finishing his shift, went straight to the park. He thought he was going to an interview, so he tried to arrive on time. However, at the meeting place, he was attacked and stabbed multiple times. The attacker took Gerardo's handbag and jacket, then gave these to the Samadi as evidence. The most important evidence against Samadi were text messages detailing the murder plan and the roles of each participant. She was so confident that she did not delete these messages. The motive for this serious crime was jealousy. She did not want to share her lover with his wife and decided that if she could not have him, no one could. She carefully planned and executed the criminal conspiracy with the help of her daughter. They were immediately arrested and denied bail due to concerns that they might flee the country. The other co-defendants were also detained before trial, except for Omar, the supervisor, and the youngest participant was handed over to the Juvenile Justice Department. The investigation lasted about a year and a half. It was not until December 2017 that the trial of all those involved in the criminal conspiracy began. Samadi has a criminal record and was once arrested for falsifying documents to receive state benefits, but was only fined. She assigned the surname of a former lover to the child without his consent. She then used the court to receive child support from this man for more than 3 years, until the fraud was discovered. Samadi was sentenced to 3 years in prison and fined a large sum. However, because she has a young child, her sentence was reduced to 5 years of suspended imprisonment. At the trial, the victim Gerardo's wife confirmed that she knew about her husband's relationship with Samadi. She also said that Samadi had threatened to kill Gerardo, but he was not too worried about these threats. The main motive for the case was Samadi's jealousy and hurt, as she could not accept that her young lover wanted to stay with his wife. Through phone records, police discovered that Samadi and her daughter Christina had planned the crime together. After the security camera footage of the murders was released, Christina had a mental breakdown. She called her mother in tears and wanted to turn herself in, but Samadi reassured her that the investigation would never lead to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. The court sentenced Samadi to 30 years in prison, Christina to 25 years, Ronald to 25 years, and Cesar to 25 years. Of the killers, one was sent to a juvenile detention center, while another was still at large at the time. Omar, who had been stalking the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family received $140,000 in moral compensation. After the trial, they expressed their gratitude to the court for giving Gerardo's killers a fair sentence. Samadi and Christina's lawyers appealed to the Court of Appeals for a reduced sentence. The appeal hearing took place in November 2019. At the same time, Ronald. According to the testimony, Ronald participated in the massacre but did not know the details of the plan. Ronald and Cesar also appealed in hopes of having their sentences reduced. As a result, each participant in the crime had their sentence reduced by 5 years. Samadi is currently serving a 25-year sentence in a women's prison in Costa Rica. In the summer of 2020, she registered her marriage to a woman named Lindsay Diaz Lopez, whom she met in prison. At the time of the registration, Lindsay had been pardoned and released from prison, while Samadhi still had to continue serving nearly 2 more decades of her sentence. The case of Janet Abaroa. For many people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, it can be very challenging to find a partner who will be a supportive and ideal husband and father. Unfortunately, love can sometimes cloud judgment, leading to relationships with people who are far from perfect and may even become a source of distress. Janet Abaroa was born on June 19, 1979, in a small town in Virginia. She was the 7th child in a large family that practiced the Mormon faith, which played a significant role in their lives from a young age. Janet was strong, independent, friendly, and intelligent. She had a deep love for children and always dreamed of becoming a mother. In high school, she played football and basketball and participated in swimming. During college, she continued to play sports for local teams, especially representing the University of Southern Virginia. In 1998, at a college game, Janet met a young football player named Raven, who played for the Southern Virginia men's team. Their relationship quickly turned into a love affair. Although Janet was friendly and outgoing, she was careful to adhere to her religious beliefs and kept her distance. Their relationship lasted for 2 years until Raven proposed to Janet. At the time, Janet was 20 years old and Raven was a year younger. They married in August 2000. To become financially independent, they both took jobs as sales associates at a sporting goods store, which required them to relocate to Durham, North Carolina. The couple rented a house in the suburbs and started their new jobs right away. From the outside, they appeared to have a happy marriage, and friends and neighbors often regarded them as the perfect couple. However, like many relationships, much of their happiness was for show. The couple quickly started facing issues. Janet often told her family and friends that she suspected Raven was cheating on her with various women. At one point, she left their home for a few days but eventually returned. This situation was very challenging for Janet, as she had always dreamed of a strong, loving family and valued loyalty. She felt devastated because she truly loved her husband and did not want to end their relationship. Compounding her difficulties, Janet discovered she was pregnant shortly after Raven admitted to cheating. Although she had always wanted a large family and was excited about the news, Raven's betrayal left her feeling overwhelmed and scared. She did not want to be a single mother. During her pregnancy, Janet grew close to her neighbors and made several friends among them. These friends even spoke to her husband, Raven, urging him to stop cheating on his pregnant wife. It seemed their words had an impact, as he promised to be a better husband. However, Janet remained unsure of the sincerity of his promises, given his history of deceit. Despite her concerns, life appeared to return to normal, especially after the birth of their son, Caden, on October 17, 2004. He became the center of Janet's world. The young family was struggling financially during a crisis. Janet, the mother, had stopped earning an income, leaving Raven as the only provider. However, his salary as a seller was not enough to support 3 people. Their landlord recognized their difficulties and agreed to postpone their rent for 3 months, understanding that the baby would add to their expenses. Despite this support, the couple still faced financial challenges, prompting them to seek assistance from the local church, which helped them in December 2004. The situation took a turn for the worse when their son was just 2 months old. Raven was arrested for stealing merchandise from the sporting goods store where he and Janet worked. He had stolen several tracksuits and sold them online, resulting in over $9,000 in losses for the store. As a consequence, Raven was fired, and overwhelmed by the shame of her husband's actions, Janet also decided to quit her job. Fortunately, Raven did not go to prison, but he was required to pay $10,000 in restitution to the store and received a 2-year probation sentence. Afterwards, Janet and Raven were both unemployed. They struggled financially. With a criminal record, Raven was unable to find regular work, but despite these challenges, the young family managed to make ends meet by working part-time. Janet's family received support from relatives while still holding down her part-time job. A few months later, they were faced with a devastating tragedy. On April 26, 2005, Janet picked up her son Caden from daycare to prepare dinner. That evening, her husband came home, they had dinner together, and after Janet and Caden fell asleep, he went to Mauriceville to attend a local mini-soccer game. When he returned home, he witnessed a horrifying scene. Janet was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Nearby, Caden was lying in his crib, fortunately, was not injured. In shock, Raven immediately called the police, reporting that his wife had been attacked and covered in blood, although he could not understand the extent of her injuries. He initially thought she had been shot. When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Janet had not been shot, but had been stabbed multiple times. She died instantly from a wound to her neck. Janet was murdered in a rented house in Gifts. Shockingly, she was pregnant and her unborn child was also killed. The police were horrified by the severity of the murder and needed to find out who could have committed such an act. After examining the crime scene, Janet's body was sent to the forensic laboratory. The autopsy revealed 3 deep stab wounds, one on her left hand, indicating that she had tried to defend herself. The fatal wound was to the neck, where the attacker had severed an artery, causing severe blood loss. With such injuries, Janet would have died within minutes. In addition, experts were unable to determine the exact time of death. At the crime scene, forensic scientists gathered a significant amount of evidence from the victim's body, which required thorough examination. Meanwhile, the police sought witnesses who might identify the likely perpetrator. Naturally, police first interviewed her husband, Raven Abaroa. He was called in for questioning multiple times. His statements helped piece together some of the events leading up to the brutal murder. He reported that on April 26, 2005, he left from Mauriceville to play a mini-football match and returned home at 10:40 p.m. When he called for his wife, she did not respond, so he went to the top floor room. There, he found her murdered. Since Raven was away, it was difficult to determine when Janet was killed. The police began investigating potential suspects based on Raven's perspective. He theorized that he believed his wife may have chosen to end her life due to financial difficulties. Raven said that sometime before her death, Janet began to behave strangely. However, Janet's family and friends dismissed this idea. They knew her well and had never heard her express such thoughts. Furthermore, Janet was very religious and would never have considered such an act. At this point, police believed that Janet's death was not voluntary. The injuries she suffered could not have been self-inflicted. Additionally, there were clear signs that someone else was in the house at the time of the attack. A bloody shoe print and a single fingerprint were found near the body. The lack of broken windows or doors suggested that the victim had voluntarily allowed the attacker into the house. There were no signs of a struggle, except for defensive wounds on Janet's arm, suggesting that she had attempted to defend herself from a blow. The attack appeared sudden, especially since Raven said that Janet was asleep when he left. It was also unusual that nothing was stolen from the house except Raven's laptop and a few kitchen knives, which may have been used in the attack. The assassin did not take any other valuables, such as rings, jewelry, or expensive items. Therefore, it does not appear to have been a robbery. At that time, there was no solid evidence against the Raven, so he was released, although police started to investigate him more thoroughly. Following the incident, Raven's behavior became increasingly suspicious. Just a day later, he packed his belongings, took his son, and moved to Utah. This reaction seems understandable, as not every husband can stay in a house where such a violent murder took place. He needed the support of his loved ones, which is why he went to where his family lived. Raven's friends later commented that he did not act like someone who had lost a loved one. He did not seem to care about what had happened to his wife or who was responsible. Raven clearly had no intention of helping find the criminal or bring justice. He did not participate in distributing or preparing the reward notice or any other action taken by the police or the family. Instead, Raven simply left with the child and refused to cooperate further. The police observed that Raven was reluctant to cooperate at first and eventually ignored all requests. While Janet's family devoted all their free time to assisting the police. The police became suspicious when they discovered that shortly before the crime, Raven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy for Janet after her second pregnancy had begun. This was unusual because the family was facing significant financial difficulties and had never purchased such insurance before. Despite lacking funds for essential expenses, Raven managed to pay for the insurance premiums. Furthermore, the Raven contacted the insurance company to claim the payout soon after the attack, even before Janet was buried. All of this raised red flags, and suspicion mounted around the Raven. Police tried to get to know Raven and quickly realized that he had been dishonest from the beginning of his relationship with Janet. He claimed to be a devout Mormon and even said that he had been on a mission to Peru. This story was false. At the time, Raven lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he lived a quiet life after receiving his insurance money. During this time, he met Vanessa Pont, a single mother who lived nearby. They soon began dating. Raven was not like other men. His friendly demeanor set him special. He knows how to attract attention, quickly winning Vanessa over with his lies. He gains her trust by claiming that his wife died in a car accident. At the time, Raven is unaware that Janet's family is watching his every move. They discover his suspicious actions and are determined to find out what he will do next, hoping to gather evidence of his involvement in Janet's death. Janet's family quickly discovers that he lied about her death. But why would he tell almost everyone that his wife died in an accident? At first, Vanessa trusts him completely and doesn't want to know the details of Janet's fate. However, her curiosity eventually leads her to the truth. Janet was the victim of an unsolved murder, dead from 3 stab wounds. Despite this, Raven manages to fool the Vanessa. He repeatedly complains to her about the police and the public's obsession with blaming him for Janet's death, claiming he had nothing to do with it and that a robber killed his wife. Surprisingly, she believes him. Meanwhile, Janet's family contacts Vanessa, his fiancée. They warn her that Raven can be dangerous and advise her to stay away from him, but she ignores their concerns. She is charmed by him and puts her trust in him. After 3 years together, Vanessa and Raven married. Vanessa experienced Raven's mood swings and frequent tantrums, during which he lost control. His violent behavior left her in fear for her life. Their marriage ended abruptly, lasting only 4 months. As the pressure from the police continued, Raven decided to speak to the press. He expressed hope that the case would be solved and the killer found, so he could be left alone. At the same time, he completely denied any involvement in the crime. During this time, a new police took over the case, determined to ensure justice for the Janet's murder. Janet's family actively supported the police and cooperated with the investigation. In this context, Vanessa's anxiety increased. She frequently questioned whether her husband could have killed his first wife, leading her to doubt his honesty. Vanessa believed he was capable of such a terrible act. Subsequently, she spoke to the media, where she revealed that her ex-husband often acted inappropriately. She recalled the worst moment in their relationship occurring on Christmas 2018. During a dispute that Raven instigated, He locked Vanessa in the bathroom and expressed his desire to hit her, stating he hated her and wouldn't care if she died. This incident marked a turning point that led to their breakup. Vanessa admitted she was very afraid of Raven and believed he would easily harm her, just as he likely did with his ex-wife. The new police believed that Raven is responsible for this crime. The main challenge is Raven's alibi for the night of the murder. Around the time Janet was attacked, he was at the stadium playing mini soccer, and several witnesses have confirmed this. Furthermore, shoe prints found at the scene do not match Raven's shoes, and bloody fingerprints on the door do not belong to Raven. However, there is something troubling about his behavior. The police called Raven to ask him a few questions over the phone. Raven repeated his story, but he did not remember many details. This raised suspicions. Raven claimed the knife had gone missing from his home on the night of the attack, discovered during a move. He said that the police did not find the knives because they did not conduct a thorough investigation, which made him doubt their ability to catch the criminal. Meanwhile, the police believed that they had not missed anything because forensic experts had spent a lot of time carefully examining the crime scene. For years, the investigation was unsuccessful. However, circumstantial evidence pointed to Raven as a suspect. Police spoke with Raven's former girlfriends, all of whom described him as very aggressive and prone to violence. Police also discovered that, on the evening of the attack, Raven locked his dog in the garage, something he had never done before. Police believed this action was significant, thinking that Raven may have feared that the dog would protect Janet and prevent him from committing the crime or attract attention to the house by barking. Police discovered that the day before the crime, the Raven transferred data from his laptop to another storage device. This raised suspicions of premeditated murder since the laptop was reportedly stolen. On February 1, 2010, based on this circumstantial evidence, the Raven Abaroa was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder and extradited to North Carolina. However, the evidence against him was insufficient, being entirely circumstantial, so police continued to gather more evidence for the trial. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they thoroughly examined the photos and the victim's body. The police noticed an open, empty contact lens case on the table next to the bed. This suggested that the Janet might have been wearing her lenses at the time of the crime. However, her parents insisted that she never went to bed with her lenses in. She always removed them before sleeping. This begs the question, was Janet killed before she went to bed and before he left? The forensic expert who conducted the autopsy overlooked whether the Janet was wearing contact lenses, but this was not intentional. Forensic scientists sometimes miss certain details because they seem irrelevant to the case. In this instance, however, the presence or absence of contact lenses could have been crucial evidence against Raven's falsehood. To verify this theory, exhuming the body became necessary. Janet's family supported the idea of exhumation, as they were determined to prove the criminal's guilt and seek justice for their loved one. In July 2010, the body was exhumed, and forensic experts discovered remnants of contact lenses in the eye, although the material was dry and disfigured. However, to convince the jury, a formal examination was needed. It was necessary to verify that the contact lens actually belonged to the Janet. To achieve this, a comprehensive study was conducted over the course of a year. Specialists used pig eyes fitted with contact lenses and subjected them to an embalming process similar to that used on human bodies before burial. The results of the experiments supported the initial hypotheses, confirming that at the time of the murder, Janet was indeed wearing contact lenses, indicating she had not gone to bed. This evidence contradicted the Raven claims. Raven Abaroa's trial began in 2013 and attracted considerable public attention, receiving extensive media coverage. Many people attended the trial. The jury was given detailed information about the facts of the case. Before the trial began, the prosecutor's office stated that they believed Raven was definitely guilty, although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The case was brought to the Supreme Court based largely on circumstantial evidence. However, there was a large body of material that should have convinced a jury of Raven's guilt. Friends and family of Janet said that just a month before her death, she had expressed concerns about her husband. She mentioned that he had serious anger issues and often lost his temper and control. Janet repeatedly expressed her fear of Raven and said she intended to leave him. Janet's mother said she often witnessed heated arguments between the couple. In interviews with police, Raven admitted to having numerous arguments with his wife but adamantly denied any wrongdoing. During the trial, the defense pointed out to the jury that police initially focused on evidence pointing to Raven's guilt, ignoring other potential suspects, and ignored several pieces of evidence. First, a pair of footprints were found at the crime scene that did not belong to Raven. Second, a bloodstain was found on the front door, the DNA of which also did not match Raven. The third important clue that was overlooked was a shoe print that the criminal would have left when he stepped in Janet's blood near the body. The prosecution then relied on the fact that Raven was manipulative, prone to violence, and subject to sudden mood swings. One of Raven's girlfriends expressed her concerns about Raven's potential mental health issues. It was clear that he was cruel and manipulative by nature, frequently communicating with other girls behind the scenes. This behavior suggested that he may have planned the murder carefully and may have misled the police. The lover then recounted an incident where Raven forced her to have sex in a car parked on the side of the road. He acted so aggressively that she had no choice but to comply. She even deliberately left a strand of her hair in the car as evidence in case anything happened to her. One possible motive for the murder, according to the prosecutor, was Janet's unexpected pregnancy. She had only shared this news with a few close people, including some of her sisters. While Janet was excited about becoming a mother, she did not view her husband as the ideal father for the child. Given their challenging financial situation, the prosecution suggested that this news could have provoked anger in Raven. During the investigation, a clear lie from the Raven emerged. Raven maintained that he found his wife dead when he spoke to the police. However, during a confession at a local church, he revealed that when he found her, she was still alive and even attempted to speak to him before losing dying. Police suspected that the Janet was involved in a relationship with another man. She intended to leave her husband and had begun communicating with her ex-boyfriend, Scott. However, their messages suggested that they had only recently started talking and that there was no romantic relationship between them. In March 2014, Raven entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to manslaughter for killing his wife. As a result, he received a 10-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Custody of their son was given to Janet's family. Raven was released from prison on Christmas Day 2017. He returned to Utah and still lives there to this day. Janet's family was outraged by the sentence, as Janet can never return, while her husband continues to live his life. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian Emergency Services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The Carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stassi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station and around midnight. He was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vi Giovanna Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the pedals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12th, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and the Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in the Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family. Kat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Kat West so attached to her dolls, she treats them like living creatures, sings to them and cherishes them. Kat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Kat West had to continue taking medication. Kat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Kat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Kat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Kat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Kat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Cat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Cat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Cat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Cat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Cat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Cat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Cat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Cat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling, and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Cat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Cat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Cat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Cat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Cat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Cat West's body was cold and stiff. Cat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Cat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m. and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Cat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Cat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Cat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Cat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Cat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Cat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Cat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door. Believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed, he claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Cat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested 2 possible scenarios: 1, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or 2, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Cat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Cat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Cat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams's phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Cat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Cat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Cat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12 revealed a heated dispute. Cat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife. After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Cat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams's defense team claimed that Kat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Kat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. The case of Leanne Tiernan. Leanne Tiernan, born on September 27, 1984, is the daughter of Michael Tiernan and Sharon Hawkhead from Bramley. Her parents divorced early, but Leanne maintains a good relationship with her father. She and her sister, Michelle, live with their mother in Leeds, while their father remains a significant part of their lives. Leanne also enjoys spending time with her grandparents. She walks them to church every Sunday morning. Leanne also loves chocolate so much that an uncle has nicknamed her Chocolate Chip Niece. Leanne, a cheerful teenage student at West Leeds High School, is working hard toward her GCSEs. After studying diligently for her exams, Leanne decides to have a day out with her 15-year-old best friend, Sarah Whitehouse. Sunday, November 26, 2000, starts out bright and sunny. After church with her grandmother, she returned home and prepared to go shopping with Sarah. Leanne wore a black and white striped sweater, black trousers, and high black boots. She also wore a blue jacket. Her hair was tied in a French twist, which her mother loved, and she set off to meet Sarah. The two took the bus to Leeds city centre. After shopping, they took the bus back home to Bramley. At around 4:50 p.m., they got off the bus and walked a short distance to Sarah's house before parting ways. Sarah saw Leanne walking towards Howley Gill. It was a deserted, unlit path in the woods, a shortcut that Leanne's mother had forbidden her to take at night. However, since it was still light, Leanne felt safe on this public path. It was only a 20-minute walk home. When Sarah called Leanne's house at 5:20 p.m. to talk, she was surprised to find that Leanne had not yet returned home. Sharon immediately called Leanne's cell phone to look for her, but there was no response. Sharon continued to call several times, but the phone only rang a few times before going dead. Finally, at 7 p.m. that evening, Sharon called the local police station to report her daughter missing. That same night, the family went to the local church to get flashlights to search the area. In the early morning, Leanne's was looked for, but there was no answer and no sign of her. West Yorkshire Police, led by Inspector Chris Gregg, launched an intensive search for her. It was a daunting task, with the area home to more than 700 houses, vacant lots, woodlands, canals, drains, and wells, many potential hiding places for the teenager. Despite the difficulties, the police were determined to find a way to bring Leanne home safely. Helicopters patrolled overhead while uniformed officers and sniffer dogs searched every nook and cranny of the streets. Litter collection was temporarily suspended to ensure that no evidence was lost. However, after a week, there was still no trace of Leanne. Investigators retraced Leanne's last steps. They were assisted by Leanne's 19-year-old sister, Michelle, and her best friend, Sarah. Michelle wore the clothes Leanne had been wearing and followed the route her sister had taken when she missing. "We tried our best, but we hoped that she had run away and that nothing bad had happened," Michelle later said. When the story was broadcast on TV, Several witnesses contacted investigators to say they had seen a man walking a black and tan dog in the Howley-Gill area just an hour before Leanne got off the bus to go home. Investigators sketched out a general description of the man, about 5 feet 1 inch tall, with a stocky build and a round face that may have been scarred. He was seen wearing a 3/4-length waterproof jacket and dirty jeans, along with a black beanie. Police quickly alerted the public and received numerous calls. All of the dog owners became suspects. Ultimately, 70 dog owners were identified, but all were ruled out as suspects. The case has gone cold as there is little new information to go on. However, the public continues to support Leanne Tiernan's family and is doing everything it can to keep her story in the spotlight. Sean Clark, a father of 3 from Leeds, heard about the case and offered a £10,000 reward for information leading to Leanne being found safe. Iceland Foods, a supermarket chain, has printed Leanne's picture and details on milk cartons sold in stores across the country. Flyers and signs featuring Leanne in her uniform and the words, "Have you seen me?" have appeared in towns and cities. The police have received some information and have been able to confirm sightings of Leanne in areas as far afield as Doncaster and Blackpool, but all the information and reports of sightings have not brought them any closer to finding her. Leanne's parents have been in the media, making desperate appeals for the public to help find their daughter. It has been a very dark Christmas for Leanne's family and loved ones. Leanne's father left Christmas presents under the tree for his missing daughter, and AW. Life CD that Michelle had bought for Leanne has remained unopened. Months have passed since they began searching for her. They have sometimes felt depressed, fearing that she had been kidnapped and would never return. But Michelle said, "We couldn't believe it. Every day, when we didn't hear from her, we would ask ourselves, is she coming home today?" In the end, more than 2,000 homes, sheds, and outbuildings along the route they believe Leanne took on her way home from the shopping trip were searched. A detective explained, "We had to establish the route she might have taken. We called it the Red Route." Police took DNA samples from more than 140 men in the area and carried out searches at various locations across Leeds. However, they found no trace of the young woman. Her family and friends remained hopeful that she would return safely. On August 20th, 2001, 9 months after Leanne went missing, police found a body in Woodland in North Yorkshire. This ended any hope that Leanne alive. Police called the family to inform them of the discovery. On the day Leanne's classmates returned to school to collect their GCSE results, Mark Bisson was walking his 2 dogs in Lindley Woods, a densely wooded area just inside the North Yorkshire county border. He came across what looked like a pile of rubbish, but it turned out to be a floral quilt. He loosened the string holding the quilt together and found what looked like a body wrapped in bin bags. Police arrived at the scene and completely removed the blanket and 9 thick green garbage bags, revealing a clothed body. The victim's hands were tied behind her back with 3 yellow cable ties, and a leather dog collar was tightly secured around her neck. Investigators pulled the black garbage bag off her head to reveal the decomposing face of a young woman. At the time of her discovery, authorities were unable to determine the exact cause of death, but there was a suggestion that strangulation may have been the cause. This was not the first time a body had been found at the site. In 1992, the body of Yvonne Fitt was discovered in the same area, and the killer was never caught. Detectives hope this case will not end in the same way. Fingerprints identified the body as that of Leanne Tiernan. An autopsy revealed that she had been strangled with a plastic cable, resulting in her death. The disappearance has been classified as a murder. Authorities believe that the perpetrator is a local people. First, Leanne's body was found 16 miles from where she was last seen. Additionally, The yellow cable used to bind her hands came from the British postal system, specifically used by Royal Mail or Parcel Force. Finally, the green bin bags in which Leanne was wrapped came from Morrison's, a large grocery chain, with 2 stores in the area. DNA samples were collected from people involved, such as family members, friends, and known sex offenders in the area, in an attempt to match DNA. On September 28th, the day after Leanne's 17th birthday, she was buried at Sanford Methodist Church in Bramley, Leeds. The church where Leanne was baptized was filled with hundreds of people paying their respects. Many spilled out onto the streets to honor her memory and share stories of Leanne's life and optimism. All attendees were dressed in brightly colored clothing. Leanne's mother, sister, and close friends, along with others, carried a white coffin into the church. A wreath bearing the words, "Night Night Baby," and the Guns N' Roses song, "November Rain," were featured at the service. The congregation sang her favorite hymns, including "Give Me Oil in My Lamp" and "Ye Shall Go Out with Joy." Inspector Chris Craig was among those who attended Leanne's funeral. When he saw Leanne's coffin being brought to Hilltop Cemetery, where she was laid to rest, his determination to find her killers and bring them to justice grew stronger than ever. After conducting tests on a sample of the victim's heart tissue, the medical examiner concluded that the victim had been murdered on the day of her abduction and that the body had been refrigerated for months. Several weeks before the victim was found, the killer attempted to dispose of the body by dumping it in a public dumpster, covered with a blanket. The killer likely hoped the body would end up in a landfill, but that did not work. Worse still, the killer hid the body so well that it made it extremely difficult to collect forensic and DNA evidence. Law enforcement hoped to make a quick breakthrough in identifying the killer. However, that hope was dashed when the results showed that no DNA from the killer was found on Leanne. They decided to investigate the items found with her. Investigators discovered dog hair on Leanne's clothing, leading them to believe they could profile the pet's DNA and from there, identify the killer. The hairs were sent to a university in Texas, which had developed a technique for profiling pet DNA. However, the university was only able to identify a partial DNA profile of the dog. This was the first time a dog's DNA profile had been collected in a case in the UK, but there was no dog to compare it to, so the results were not used. The scarf found around Leanne's neck, which contained her hair, was a vital clue. Investigators tested the hairs for DNA and created a DNA profile. They then focused on the dog collar that had been used to wrap the bin liner around the victim's neck. The collar was manufactured by Armitage Leather Products in Nottingham. If the killer had purchased the collar from this company, investigators hoped to establish the name or address of the suspect. The company had reported that it had sold its products to 220 different wholesalers across the UK and had provided sales receipts to the police. Investigators began contacting each company to see if they had any records of sales to the Leeds area of West Yorkshire. They gained a lot of useful information from this investigation. Pet Pajamas, a mail order. Her company, based in Liverpool, had sold 3 leather collars and leashes from Armitage. Information about these 3 customers was passed on to investigators and began looking into their backgrounds. One of these customers quickly became a suspect. His name was John Taylor, and he lived in Bramley, just about 3/4 of a mile from where Leanne missing. This suspect had been mentioned earlier in the investigation. When Leanne's body was discovered, witnesses claimed that he had been in the woods with his dog. However, when questioned, he claimed that his dog had died before Leanne was murdered. Did John kill his pet to destroy evidence? Investigators wanted to know more about John. When asked how often he had been to the area where Leanne had missing, he claimed it was not a place he had ever visited and stated that he certainly did not go there with a dog. On the outside, John appeared to be a normal man, He was a 45-year-old parcel delivery driver working for Parcel Force, A division of the Royal Mail. His only previous conviction was for stealing a suit of clothes when he was 15. John was married and had 2 children, a son born in 1981 and a daughter born in 1983. The couple divorced in 1996. John lived alone in a terraced house on Cockshott Road in Bramley, Leeds. However, there were concerns that he enjoyed torturing the animals he hunted. His neighbors thought he was a normal person, but they had witnessed him catching and torturing rabbits, as well as stabbing a fox several times during his poaching trips. He also seemed to enjoy killing pheasants. After moving to his new home on Cockshott Road in 1982, John began keeping and breeding dogs and ferrets. His wife at the time, Janet, was usually proud of their home, but the stench from the animal feces gradually affected their marriage. She tolerated the situation until one day when he brought home 2 large owls to raise in the house. The owls lived on a diet of newly hatched chicks, which he had bought by the thousands and stored in a large freezer on the property. Janet eventually decided to file for divorce. After that, John traveled across the country, but not for work. Instead, he sought women and often engaged in sexual encounters. He also used Lonely Hearts ads. Through John's phone records, investigators began to track down women to interview. Most described him as harmless, but some admitted that they had called the police to report him as a suspect after Leanne's body was discovered and revealed details about her murder. 2 women painted a picture of a man with violent tendencies. One woman mentioned that he had asked to have sex with her daughter. An ex-girlfriend broke up with John due to his interest in bondage. He would tie her hands with rope and cover her face with a scarf. When the investigator asked her to describe how John bound her, she said he used a bundle of ropes that he kept in a drawer next to her bed. Specifically, he placed a plastic rope around each of her wrists and then used a 3rd rope to tie both of her hands behind her back. This method was similar to how Leanne was found, and this information has never been made public. Police arrested and questioned John. They took a DNA sample from him and searched his home and personal property. Police quickly cordoned off John's home on Cockshott Road, erected a 7-foot wall, and conducted a thorough search of the property. In the backyard, they found a hedge, a plum tree, and a poplar. Pollen patterns consistent with these plants were found on Leanne's hair, skin, and nasal passages, indicating that she had been there before she was murdered. When they dug up the garden, they discovered the remains of several animals, including 28 ferrets in a mass grave and the skeletons of 4 dogs. One of the dogs, which was brown and black, appeared to have suffered head trauma. It is possible that John killed the dog to cover up his involvement. When police learned that a man with a dog was being sued, hairs from the terrier were tested and matched those found on Leanne's body. Inside the house, the carpet had been removed. However, upon closer inspection, investigators found some pink carpet fibers caught in nails on the floor. These fibers matched exactly those found on Leanne's body. They also discovered Leanne's blood on the floor. The green bin bag that was tied around Leanne's body was manufactured in Devon. The manufacturer informed investigators that they had only produced a small quantity of this type of rope, which was used to make rabbit nets. The rope found at John's home matched the rope used on Leanne's body. In addition, a large quantity of distinctive yellow zip ties, manufactured by an Italian company for the Royal Mail, were found in his home. John, an employee of Parcel Force, a division of the Royal Mail, could have easily obtained these zip ties. Police also found a similar type of bin bag wrapped around a nail in John's kitchen. Furthermore, there were 3 RGE freezers on John's property. At first, John denied any involvement in knowing Leanne or having anything to do with her. However, when investigators presented all the evidence they had gathered, John eventually admitted that he had kidnapped Leanne but insisted that her death was an accident. According to John's testimony, after taking Leanne home, there was a struggle, and Leanne fell, hitting her head and dying on the spot. However, no evidence supported the claim that Leanne fell. Additionally, John could not explain why Leanne was strangled or why her hands were tied with cables. Investigators have gained a better understanding of what happened to Leanne that night. Leanne was walking alone through the dark, unlit streets of Hollygill when John attacked her from behind. Although there were no direct witnesses, it was reported that someone heard a muffled scream. John covered her mouth and eyes with a scarf, wrapped her in a coat, and took her to his home, which took 22 minutes. There, he tied her hands behind her back and made her sit on a bench in the old kitchen. He strangled her with a cord and a scarf, then kept her body in the kitchen freezer for months. Before Leanne's body was discovered, his friends reported that a freezer in his kitchen was missing. Investigators believe that the freezer may have been damaged, prompting John to dispose of Leanne's body, a decision that ultimately led to his arrest. On February 15, 2002, John Taylor, 46, was convicted of Leanne's murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to 2 life terms and must serve 20 years before he can be considered for parole. Investigators believe this was not John's first crime. The way he hid and disposed of the body was carefully planned, suggesting he had committed offenses before. After police identified John's DNA in a database, they linked him to 2 previous attacks. The first attack occurred on October 18, 1988, when John, wearing a mask and wielding a knife, attacked a 32-year-old woman. And as she walked past Hollygill to pick up her children from school. The second incident occurred on March 1, 1989, when John, wearing a mask and wielding a knife, broke into the home of a 21-year-old mother. He dragged her into a bedroom and attacked her, stripping, blindfolding, and gagging her before assaulting her, while her 18-month-old daughter cried in the next room. John received 2 additional sentences for these crimes. In the years that followed, police conducted a nationwide review of unsolved cases similar to Leanne's. In 2018, John admitted to a series of sexual offenses against 5 women between 1977 and 1996, highlighting the seriousness of his misconduct. In another incident, he held a pregnant woman at knife point and forced her to perform a sexual act on him in 1977, just before Christmas. John Taylor was sentenced to life in prison for assaulting and attacking a barmaid. He is currently serving his sentence at Wakefield Prison, a maximum security facility also known as Monster Mansion, which houses many dangerous criminals who have committed extremely serious crimes. John has been implicated in nearly 10 unsolved murders. Among them is the murder of Yvonne Fitt, a 33-year-old woman whose body was found in a shallow grave about 100 yards from where Leanne's body was dumped in 1992. Lindsay Reimer, a 13-year-old girl, also missing after leaving home to run an errand, and her body was found 5 months later in a canal, less than 20 miles from John's home in Bramley. Deborah Woods was found at Elite train station. She was discovered in a bin bag, wrapped in bedding after being stored in a cold storage room. Rebecca Hall, a prostitute, died in Bradford, along with several others. Questions remain about how many murders and attacks John may have committed and how long he may have evaded capture. That he has managed to avoid arrest for so long is concerning. The case of Rachel O'Reilly. Rachel O'Reilly was born in 1974 in the northern outskirts of County Dublin, Ireland. She was adopted by Rose and Jim Calley at a young age, as her biological parents were not known to her. The Calley, unable to have children of their own, devoted their love to their 5 adopted children, including Rachel. Growing up, Rachel was a diligent and ambitious individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, assisted her parents with household chores, and avoided causing any trouble. As a result, she developed into a sociable, open, and exceptionally kind person who easily connected with others and steered clear of conflicts. During her teenage years, Rachel developed a passion for softball, regularly competing in tournaments and setting multiple local records. She also formed a strong bond with her adoptive mother, confiding in her and maintaining a close relationship even after she got married and started a family of her own. After graduating from high school, Rachel attended a local university to study marketing. At the same time, she worked in sales at a department store in the city, where she met Joe O'Reilly. Joe O'Reilly was born in 1972 in County Dublin to a humble family. He was the second child and had an older sister. His parents instilled in their children the value of hard work and independence. As a young man, Joe was tall, athletic, and enjoyed softball. After completing high school, he studied advertising through correspondence and worked as a manager in a department store. It was at this department store that he met Rachel, who started working there a few months after Joe. At the time of their meeting, Joe was 19 and Rachel was 17. Joe was immediately drawn to Rachel, taking the initiative to introduce himself to Rachel. Her petite stature and bright smile captivated him. Joe was interested in taking Rachel on a date, but she refused for reasons unknown. Despite this, Joe continued to try to win her over by giving her compliments and surprising her with small gifts like flowers and chocolates at work. However, Rachel remained unresponsive to his efforts. Joe read Rachel's favorite book to find a common conversation topic, but things only improved when Joe discovered Rachel's passion for softball. He joined her at the stadium, walked onto the field during practice, and participated in the game. With his experience and skills in softball, Joe led the team to victory, finally impressing Rachel and having a date. Their relationship progressed quickly. He surprised Rachel with a trip to Paris, where he proposed on the Eiffel Tower. Rachel couldn't resist and agreed to marry him, thinking she had found a fairy tale prince. Years later, they married and had 2 sons. They moved to the Scottish province of Null, purchasing a cozy home perfect for raising their children. After the birth of their eldest son, Rachel left her job to care for her husband and child. 2 years later, they had a second son. At work, Joe demonstrated his capabilities as a reliable, skilled, and diligent specialist. He was always punctual, arriving first and leaving last when necessary. Joe also prioritized fitness, often visiting the gym before work, and even had exercise equipment at home. As their children grew older and started attending kindergarten, Joe's wife Rachel sought to supplement their income. She became a distributor for a well-known cosmetics company and sold household items. This new role allowed her to interact more with their neighbors, who appreciated her kindness and openness. However, as time passed, Joe's presence at home became increasingly scarce. He would only return to sleep, shower, and change clothes, attributing his absence to his demanding job and anticipated promotion. Despite his wife's support, they began to drift apart, and their family relationship declined significantly. In the summer of 2004, a disturbing incident occurred. An anonymous individual sent a letter to Child Protective Services, falsely accusing Rachel of being a bad mother and mistreating her 4- and 2-year-old sons. As a result, a special commission visited the family's home to investigate the allegations. Despite finding no evidence of wrongdoing and receiving positive testimonials from relatives and neighbors about Rachel's parenting, the letter tarnished her reputation. On Monday, October 4, 2004, Rachel's day began normally. Her husband, Joe, left for work at dawn while she and their sons were still asleep. Throughout the day, Joe attempted to contact Rachel several times via text and phone calls, but she didn't respond. He then called their home phone, leaving a worried message on the answering machine, asking Rachel to call him back as soon as possible. In the afternoon, Joe received a concerning call from the kindergarten teacher, informing him that Rachel had failed to pick up the children, which was unprecedented. Joe called his mother-in-law to ask if she knew where Rachel was. When she said she didn't know, Joe asked her to go to their home to check on things. At the same time, Joe went to pick up the kids from kindergarten. When Rose arrived at her daughter's house, she saw Rachel's car in the yard, so she knew Rachel was home. However, the house was dark and quiet, and Rachel didn't answer when Rose called out to her. The first thing Rose noticed was the chaotic state of the house, with cabinets and drawers wide open and their contents scattered all over the floor, resembling a robbery scene. However, Rachel was nowhere to be found. As Rose's mother entered the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying sight. Rachel lay on the floor in a massive pool of her own blood, which was splattered everywhere, on the walls, furniture, and even the ceiling. Rachel's hair was bloody and matted, with her skull visible in some areas. Rose rushed to her daughter, hoping against hope that she might still be alive. But upon touching Rachel's arm, she realized it was cold and stiff, indicating that Rachel had been dead for several hours and that there was no possibility of saving her. Overwhelmed by grief, Rose started screaming and calling out for help before dashing to the phone to dial the police. Her cries for help attracted the attention of the neighbors, including a doctor, who hastened to the scene. He was the first to examine Rachel's body, confirming that she was beyond help. By the time Joe arrived, a crowd had gathered outside the house. Upon learning of his spouse's death, Joe was consumed by anguish, screaming in disbelief as he rushed inside. In the bedroom, beside his wife's lifeless body, Rachel became unhinged. He cried, screamed, and vowed to avenge his wife's brutal murder. The police officers who arrived at the scene described it as the most horrific attack on a defenseless woman they had ever encountered. The murder weapon was likely a heavy, blunt object used with extreme force to inflict severe injuries on Rachel. The attack was so vicious that Rachel's body showed no signs of attempting to defend herself, suggesting she was caught off guard from behind. While the crime scene resembled a robbery, investigators suspected a personal motive or intense hatred due to the brutality of the attack. However, it was unclear who could harbor such animosity towards a young, petite mother of two. The investigation began with interviews of Rachel's family members and neighbors, who all claimed she had no enemies and was well-liked by everyone. None of the neighbors reported seeing anything suspicious on the day of the murder, including strange cars or individuals near the victim's house. Joe, Rachel's husband, stated he had spent most of the day at a bus depot on the other side of town for work and had a coworker who could confirm his alibi. The coworker corroborated Joe's statement, but the police couldn't shake off their lingering doubts. The scene resembled a robbery, yet nothing of significant value was missing. A sum of €1,000 lay untouched on the bedside table in plain sight, and another stash in the kitchen cupboard was also left undisturbed. In the dressing table, a jewelry box was found, but only a pair of chains and earrings were missing, discovered separately in a drawer. Joe reported that a digital camera, silverware, and one of his dumbbells, likely used as the murder weapon, were also missing. The whole situation seemed bizarre. The house was ransacked, the landlady brutally murdered, all for seemingly trivial items. When questioned by the police, Joe appeared distraught, crying, shaking, and feverish. However, one investigator later noted that Joe's state seemed more like nervous excitement than genuine grief or shock. Joe's behavior became even more suspicious when asked about the possibility of his wife having an affair. He firmly denied it, but then awkwardly added that he had never cheated on his wife, a statement that sounded unconvincing. 2 miles away from the crime scene, a bag was discovered in some bushes. The bag contained a camera, silverware, and a few pieces of jewelry that matched the items reported stolen by Joe. With this new evidence, the initial theory of a robbery gone wrong could be ruled out, and the case was reclassified as a premeditated murder. The widower, who had been trying to show grief and pain, came under suspicion because his emotions seemed insincere, making him the primary suspect. Joe had no evidence to present, so the detectives had to thoroughly investigate his alibi, the crime scene, and his relationship with his wife. Joe claimed that on the morning of the incident, he stopped by the gym, which was a regular part of his routine. Surveillance cameras in the parking lot and the gym confirmed his presence. He then went to the office and later visited a bus station in a remote area of the city to check on the placement of advertisements on vehicles. A colleague corroborated Joe's story, stating that they had spoken on the phone around that time. The investigators then seized Joe's computer from his workplace for further inspection. The emails on Joe's computer contained some suspicious correspondence, which he had partially deleted. However, specialists were able to recover the deleted messages, and the police became convinced they were on the right track. The emails revealed that Joe frequently communicated with his friend and sister, constantly complaining about his wife, Rachel. He used insults and profanity to describe her, stating that she no longer attracted him as a woman and that she caused him outright disgust. Moreover, the computer revealed a suspicious correspondence between Joe and his colleague, Nikki Pelly. It was evident from their communication that their relationship went beyond a friendship, and both of them should be questioned. Nikki Pelly worked at an advertising company and frequently interacted with Joe for work-related purposes. Despite being 10 years older than Joe, she and Joe were having an affair. The exact timeline of their workplace romance was unclear, but it was discovered that Joe spent evenings and nights at Nikki's place. Meanwhile, his wife, Rachel, was under the impression that Joe was busy with work. Joe's messages to Nikki revealed that he promised they would soon be together, along with his sons from his marriage to Rachel. These messages raised suspicions, as the children would likely live with Rachel in the event of a divorce. Initially, Joe denied having any extramarital affairs. However, when confronted with irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, he admitted to secretly dating Nikki for a period before allegedly breaking up. The O'Reilly house was cordoned off as a crime scene for over a week, and no one was allowed to enter while the police thoroughly examined and documented the premises. During this time, Joe lived with his sister at their grandparents' home. At the funeral, Joe's behavior was unexpected. Instead of appearing distraught, he seemed remarkably calm and composed, almost as if he was avoiding the coffin. When it was his turn to bid farewell, he did so briefly and without emotion. As he walked away, he casually remarked that the coffin could be closed and buried. After the family returned home, they found everything in the same state as it was on the day of the crime, except for the absence of the body. Joe asked his in-laws to accompany him, and they agreed, thinking he needed their support. However, upon arriving at the scene, Joe began to speculate about the killer's actions in a way that seemed unusual. He walked around the room where his wife had been murdered, describing the attack in vivid detail. He pointed out dried blood spatters and suggested that the perpetrator might have gone to the bathroom to wash off the blood and clean the crime weapon before taking it with him. Joe's account was disturbingly detailed, and he even used gestures to mimic the blows, which was unsettling to witness. However, his parents thought his behavior was a way to cope with stress and talk about his feelings. Meanwhile, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that her son-in-law was repeating a pattern of behavior and was responsible for their daughter's murder. Shortly after the funeral, Joe started seeking media attention, giving numerous interviews. He invited reporters to his home, giving them a tour of the crime scene and describing what happened. On camera, Joe would address the killer, urging them to surrender to the police. 3 weeks after the tragedy, the family agreed to participate in a TV program about the crime. While Rachel's parents were overcome with grief, Joe acted like a celebrity on set. He chatted with the makeup artists, asked about his on-camera appearance. The police, who still suspected Joe, and followed him and discovered he went to see his mistress, Nikki, after the TV show. By then, they were convinced he was the killer and focused on gathering evidence for the court. Gathering evidence was a lengthy, complicated, and painstaking process, mainly because the key piece of evidence, the instrument of the crime, was never found. However, other crucial evidence was collected. The first to testify were Nikki, Joe's mistress, and the colleague who had previously confirmed Joe's alibi. Both faced potential jail time for perjury and decided to come clean to avoid risking their freedom. Nikki revealed that she and Joe had never actually broken up, despite their earlier claims. In fact, their ongoing relationship had been discovered by Rachel, leading to a major argument between the spouses on the eve of the tragedy. The colleague, on the other hand, admitted that he wasn't entirely sure if Joe was at the bus station on the other side of the city at the time of his wife's murder. He had simply corroborated Joe's story as a favor, without realizing at the time that Joe was a suspect in the crime. Investigators also recovered incriminating correspondence from Joe's computer, including messages where he insulted his wife and made plans for a future with Nikki and their children. Furthermore, after reviewing numerous interviews with Joe and footage from a TV program, police concluded that he had described the crime in disturbing detail, suggesting that only the perpetrator could have known such specifics. Joe's careless comments helped investigators piece together the events of the crime. He began the day by intentionally making an appearance at the gym, ensuring he was captured on camera. Later, he informed his colleagues that he would be working in a different part of the city, and his phone might be out of range. However, instead of heading to the bus station as he claimed, he returned home and armed himself with a dumbbell. He lay in wait in the marital bedroom for his wife, who had taken their children to kindergarten. When she arrived, he launched a surprise attack from behind, leaving her no chance of escape. After the murder, Joe, who later confessed, washed the blood off himself and the dumbbell in the adjacent bathroom. Joe changed his clothes and scattered his belongings to make it look like a robbery. He then went to work, getting rid of the evidence along the way. In an attempt to create an alibi, he called his wife's cell phone, sent her messages, and left voicemails, pretending she was still alive. At work, he acted strangely, appeared overly excited, and had shaky hands. His colleagues noticed this and asked if he was okay, but he seemed confused and rushed to his office. Shortly after, the daycare center called to inform him that his daughter hadn't been picked up. Instead of rushing home, he sent his mother-in-law to the house, where she would be the first to discover her daughter's disfigured body. Joe thought he had covered his tracks and that his guilt would be impossible to prove. However, his desire for fame and public attention ultimately led to his downfall. Despite most of the evidence being circumstantial, Joe was arrested 2 years after committing the crime. The key to proving his guilt lay in reconstructing his movements on the day of the crime, using data from a cell phone that he always carried with him. Notably, at the time of Rachel's murder, Joe's cell phone signal was coming from the family home, which was later verified through phone records. Additionally, it was revealed during the trial that an anonymous letter to Child Protective Services, accusing Rachel of being an abusive mother, was written by Joe's mother at his request. Joe had been trying to discredit his wife, as he knew he would not be granted sole custody of their children in the event of a divorce. However, when social services investigated the claims made in the anonymous letter, they found no evidence to support them. Undeterred, Joe decided to take matters into his own hands. During the trial, he showed no remorse, chatting animatedly with his defense attorneys and even attempting to joke, convinced that he would be acquitted. But in the summer of 2007, the court found Joe guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The lawyers attempted to dispute the decision but were unsuccessful, with all their complaints and appeals being denied. Joe and Nikki's relationship continued even after he was imprisoned. She regularly visited him for many years, but they stopped communicating in 2022 for unknown reasons. Throughout his imprisonment, Joe O'Reilly maintained his innocence. He became a well-behaved inmate, avoiding any issues in the hopes of becoming eligible for parole in the future. The case of Charlene Gallego. Charlene Gallego, born Charlene William, born on October 10, 1956, into a middle-class family. Parents are Mercedes and Charles. As the only child in the family, she was always pampered by her parents because of their utmost love. She excelled in school, being a clever but shy student, and showed promise as a talented violinist. However, her life took a turn for the worse during her teenage years, plagued by issues with substance abuse, drinking, and a gambling habit. By the age of 21, Charlene had been through 2 marriages and divorces and was running her own flower and glassware boutique, set up with her parents' help. She was also pursuing further education at the university. Charlene met Gerald in Sacramento, California, on September 10, 1977, just before her 21st birthday. Gerald, who was born in July 1946, was 10 years Charlene's senior and had an extensive history of crime. His upbringing was marked by instability. With his mother working as a sex worker and having multiple abusive partners, while his father, also a career criminal, was estranged from the family. Gerald's father was ultimately executed in Mississippi's gas chamber for killing 2 police officers during a prison escape. Gerald began his life of crime at a young age. By age 6, he had committed burglary and other sex crimes. At 12 years old, he was charged with lewd and lascivious acts for assaulting a 6-year-old girl. When he met Charlene, Gerald had amassed 23 arrests and had served time in prison for robbery. He had also been convicted of various other charges, including rape, incest, vehicle theft, and assaults with a deadly weapon. Gerald's first marriage was to a 21-year-old woman when he was 16. They had a daughter, Krista, who would later file charges against her father for sexual abuse in 1978. Gerald went on to marry several more times, but his relationships were short-lived due to his violent and abusive behavior. Gerald met Charlene, and they quickly formed a connection, moving in together within a week. However, Charlene soon discovered Gerald's controlling, manipulative nature. Their sex life was initially healthy, but it became a cause for concern when Gerald revealed he struggled with becoming aroused in consensual relationships. Gerald also admitted to having fantasies about non-consensual partners, which he referred to as sex slaves. To address this issue, the couple tried using role-playing, but unfortunately, this approach did not work as they had hoped. Eventually, Gerald began to devise a plan. At the time of the first murder, his girlfriend Charlene was 2 months pregnant, but she later had an abortion because Gerald did not want to be a father again. On September 11, 1978, 2 teenagers, 17-year-old Rhonda Sheff and 16-year-old Kippy Vort, disappeared from the Country Club Plaza shopping center in Sacramento. Charlene lured them into their 1973 Dodge van by offering marijuana. The girls climbed into the back of the van, where Gerald was waiting. He threatened them with a .25 caliber pistol, tied them up, and ordered Charlene to drive toward the Sierra Nevada mountains. As they went further and left the residential area, he told Charlene to stop in a remote area. He then took the girls away one at a time and sexually assaulted them. After returning to the van, Gerald told Charlene to drive to her friend's house to create an alibi, also added that she should go back by Oldsmobile. Charlene followed his instructions, and when she came back, she found Kippy and Rhonda in the van, who were then forced into the back of the vehicle. On their way back to Sacramento, Gerald had the car pulled over. He attacked both girls, knocking them unconscious with a tire iron, and then shot them in the head. Gerald and Charlene left the bodies behind and drove away. Charlene and Gerald chose to stay out of sight for a while, so they left California and temporarily moved to Reno, Nevada. Charlene's parents advised her to take her cousin's birth certificates to help Gerald get the necessary documents for work. Gerald also obtained a driver's license under the name Stephen Fail. While in Reno, the couple found regular jobs and led a normal life. They even got married during this period, but the time they do not commit a crime is only temporary. On June 24, 1979, Gerald and Charlene went to the Washoe County Fair. 14 years old, Brenda Judd and 13 years old Sandra Colley were heading home when Charlene approached them as they were leaving the fairgrounds. She asked if they would help her distribute leaflets and promised to pay them. The girls agreed and followed Charlene to her van to get more leaflets. Both girls got into the van, and shortly after, Gerald, who had been watching from a distance, came up to the vehicle. He was carrying a weapon and threatened the girls before tying them up. He then instructed Charlene to drive towards I-80 but made a stop at a hardware store first, where he picked up a hammer and a shovel. Then Charlene drove the vehicle into the hills. In the back of the van, the two young girls, Brenda and Sandra, were assaulted. Similar to the previous incident, Gerald and Charlene parked in a remote area, where they let Brenda and Sandra out one at a time before killing them. Gerald then buried their bodies using a shovel he had recently bought. The next day, Charlene cleaned the van to eliminate any forensic evidence left by the victims. Gerald kept the shovel and hammer he had used, and a few months later, Gerald and Charlene returned to Sacramento. After returning to California, Gerald was eager to find another victim. They decided on the Sunrise Mall in Citrus Heights, about 20 minutes outside of Sacramento, as their next target. On April 24, 1980, they chose two 17-year-old girls, Stacy Redican and Karen Twix. Similar to their previous victims, Stacy and Karen were lured into the back of the van with the promise of drugs. Gerald, armed with a .357 Magnum, threatened and tied them up. Afterward, Stacy and Karen were taken east on I-80 and sexually assaulted during the drive. Gerald instructed Charlene to take them to Limerick Canyon, where both girls were murdered. On their way home, Charlene threw Gerald's hammer out the window. Around the same time, Charlene became pregnant again. This time, Gerald was pleased with the news, and they decided to keep the child. While on vacation in Oregon on July 7, 1980, Gerald and Charlene committed another crime. While driving on a highway, they saw 21-year-old Linda Aguila, who was pregnant and walking home from shopping. They offered her a ride, which she accepted. Charlene drove while Gerald sexually assaulted Linda in the back of the van. After finding a place to stop, Charlene got out and wandered around until Gerald was done. In a secluded area, he took Linda away from the van, hit her on the head with a rock, and strangled her to death. Linda's body was discovered later that month, in a shallow grave outside Gold Beach, Oregon. Although a witness saw Linda enter unidentified van, authorities suspected her abusive boyfriend might have been behind a crime. 9 days later, Gerald and Charlene spent the evening at the Sail Inn Bar in West Sacramento. After the bar closed, they waited for the bartender in the parking lot, a young woman named Virginia Mutchell, because Gerald was interested in her. When Virginia left work, Gerald forced her into the van at gunpoint. Not like previous times, Gerald and Charlene drove straight home instead of to a deserted area. While Gerald sexually invaded Virginia, Charlene stayed inside their house. Afterward, they drove away, and Gerald strangled Virginia. They dumped her body outside Clarksburg, where it was later discovered by law enforcement. Regular customers at the Sail Inn told investigators about Gerald and Charlene, who had been there the night before. Authorities were able to track them down, and Gerald admitted they were at the bar but claimed they had no knowledge of what happened to Virginia. Charlene said she and Gerald had gone fishing that day. Investigators found fishing line that had been used to tie Virginia's hands. But this evidence wasn't enough to file charges, causing the case to stall. Following this, Gerald became more violent and angry, leading to he and Charlene's separation. She then moved in with her parents. During this period, Gerald left town and started a relationship with another woman. However, by early November, he returned to Sacramento and asked to meet Charlene. She agreed, and on November 1st, they borrowed Charlene's parents' Oldsmobile and went to a bar. At the bar, Gerald expressed his desire to find another slave, and they then drove to the Arden Fair shopping center. Charlene was stunned when her husband exited the vehicle and came back with two university students, Craig Miller and Mary Sowers. They quietly got into the car as Gerald aimed a gun at them. Just as they were about to drive off, a friend of Craig noticed them and asked what was happening. Without thinking, Charlene drove out of her parking spot and sped away. Meanwhile, Craig's friend quickly noted the license plate numbers and reported the situation to the police. Charlene drove Craig and Mary into El Dorado County until Gerald told her to stop. He then forced Craig out of the car and shot him 3 times in the head. When returning to Oldsmobile, Gerald had Charlene drive them to his home, where he took Mary into the bedroom and sexually assaulted her. Later, Charlene drove them to a secluded area, where Mary was killed. The next day, when Gerald and Charlene returned to Charlene's parents' house, they found out that the police were already informed about the situation. Gerald left Charlene to face the police alone. Charlene told investigators that she and Charlene had gone to a movie in his red Triumph, but investigators were informed that the car had not moved all night. She then claimed she couldn't remember the details because she had been drinking. Meanwhile, Gerald decided he needed to move Craig's body, but it had already been discovered near Bass Lake, California. Likely in a panic, Gerald and Charlene decided to flee the state. They drove to Reno, abandoned their car, and took a bus to Salt Lake City, Utah. Back in Sacramento, Craig's friend identified Gerald from a photo taken, and Charlene's parents confirmed their son-in-law's identity, Gerald. Detectives also found that the bullets recovered from Craig's body matched those that Gerald had fired into the ceiling at his workplace. In Utah, Charlene contacted her parents for money, and they sent her money, Mercedes and Charles. Gerald and Charlene then moved to Denver, Colorado, and later to Omaha, Nebraska, where they her parents for more money. They agreed to help again but informed the FBI about the situation. The FBI was waiting for the couple at a Western Union office, where they were arrested without any issues. After being returned to California, both Gerald and Charlene pleaded not guilty. Charlene's lawyers successfully negotiated a plea deal for her. By pleading guilty to the first-degree murders of Craig, Mary, and providing testimony against Gerald, she would receive a prison sentence of just 16.5 years. Avoiding the death penalty. Charlene agreed to this deal and shared everything she knew with law enforcement. In Nevada, she also pleaded guilty to the second-degree murders of Karen and Stacy through a similar arrangement. Although California sought to overturn Charlene's plea bargain due to dissatisfaction with sentence, the charges related to the murders of Craig and Mary were dropped entirely in 1983. During her testimony, Charlene stated that she participated in the crimes because she was afraid of Gerald, describing him as violent and abusive. She claimed that he took all the money she earned and manipulated her whenever she expressed dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, Gerald tried to discredit Charlene by revealing her affair with a man other. He also labeled her as a drug addict. Gerald took the stand and gave testimony, but he revealed many inconsistencies in his testimony. He ultimately urged the jury to trust him, but they were not persuaded. As a result, Gerald Gallego was sentenced to death for the murders of Craig Miller and Mary Sowers, which occurred on June 21, 1983. He was also found guilty of the murders of Karen Twiggs and Stacy Redican. While the remains of Brenda and Sandra were discovered in Lassen County, California, he was not tried for those deaths. Gerald maintained his innocence throughout and spent a quiet life in prison until he died from cancer in 2002 at the age of 56, while still awaiting execution. In July 1997, Charlene was released from prison. While incarcerated, she gave birth to her son, also named Gerald, who was raised by her parents. Tragically, he later died while serving in the military. After her release, Charlene chose not to return to Sacramento and started using her maiden name. She has reportedly returned to the area under the name Mary Martinez and currently works for In Charity.